All right, great. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Selectboard on Tuesday, September 19th, 2023 at 6:01 p.m. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anyone like to lead us this evening?
I will.
Okay.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right, so no local liquor control board items. We will now end this portion of the Hartford Select Board and reopen as the local cannabis control board. We will consider the approval of Easy Green Genetix LLC alternatives for a local cannabis license for a Tier 1 indoor cultivation facility located in White River Junction. Stephanie, are you here to talk? Can you come up to the platform? The podium, and maybe just tell us about the license or anything else you think that we might want to hear, and then we'll have some questions.
So we are doing a very small Tier 1 indoor. It won't be maximizing the 1,000 square feet of canopy that's allowed under the license.
Okay.
We're opening it in a temporary location until we build our facility on Hartford Ave that I know a lot of you are familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just sort of an interim. We've gone through all of the department heads, zoning, fire, water, and we've also passed the licensing with the Cannabis Control Board at the state level. So we've gone through all of that, and you guys are my last to jump through, as I say. But yeah, we're in a good position, and yeah.
Great. Any questions for Stephanie? Not. Do you have a question?
I guess I don't have a question. I just have a comment. This is another situation where we don't have a lot of control as a local cannabis control board. And again, I'm going to reiterate what I stated when this town decided to bring cannabis into the town. We don't have a lot of control over this for the people out there that are listening. And there's not much we can do about it. The town taxpayers voted to have cannabis. We have no control. It's at the state level, and that's basically where it's at. The only concern that I had in reading what was given is the fact about the electrical consumption and whether you folks had decided to upgrade your electrical based on the suggestion of a fire marshal.
No, we are not. We're not going to be maxing out our electrical load. So we've been working with a licensed electrician to review the load. And as I talked with the Department of Public Works, we've been home cultivators for a long time. And so what we're doing is kind of shifting that load just to the different. So we're not expecting to max out or have any issues. We're using, LED technology and lower load stuff. So we've worked all that through with the electrician, and it's not our ideal scene that will be built on Hartford Avenue, to be determined. But yeah. So
from the perspective of Public Works, since both of you are here, does this elevate the concern for the Department of Public Safety, I should say, for public safety, to respond to any incidences that may take place at this facility because of the fire marshals?
Point of clarification. That's a different location than what.
I understand that.
That's just not what's being reviewed or discussed.
Right? No, I'm discussing what's happening at home.
It's not really an appropriate question to ask, Lanny. All of the department heads have reviewed the application, and if any of the department heads had a concern, they would have indicated that. So
okay, well, I see the report from the fire marshal. That's why I'm asking the fire chief if he's here, if there's any concerns based on that report.
I don't want to set a precedent for that.
I'm fully supportive of this. I just wanted to report back to the board. The last time we were acting as the Cannabis Control Commission. Mm-hmm. We had discussed just reaching out to the CCB at the state level for clarification. One of the things was there seemed to be from previous applicants, not from Stephanie, but in the last meeting, some confusion or lack of clarity about the fact that they would need to come to us for final approval.
Mhm.
James Pepper, who's the commissioner of cannabis, I don't know if that's the official title, he's the head of the CCB at the state level, said that that is pretty clearly explicated on their website. And he says it doesn't mean that they can't do a better job of informing, but that process is laid out. He said that it is possible that we could require or ask for local licensee applicants to come to us first, but that it seems to be the case that statewide cannabis control commissions at the local level would prefer to see applicants after they've already been vetted and approved by the state level CCB, which is obviously a lot more rigorous. And that's personally what I would recommend that we do, just in keeping with current practice. So none of this is specific to Stephanie, and I would be happy to make a motion if you'll entertain one. But I did want to
Any other-
update the select board since we are topically here.
Do you have any other questions before we go to a motion?
Just clarification, and I apologize because I should probably know this, but every application is a 1-year application in this case, right?
Yes, so we're required to renew annually with the
Yes.
state and then again with you guys, as I would understand it. I think it's also important to point out to the board, I know the town is aware of it, there are cultivators, licensed cultivators operating in the town that did not go through the local control. And you know, as someone who has followed the rules every step of the way, that concerns me. But Lisa had said that the state board has fixed the glitch, they believe, so that that wouldn't happen, so that those cultivators that are operating today that you have not seen yet will be required to come next. And I don't know if there's any control you guys have over asking them to resubmit or that.
I've already seen one.
Yeah.
You have, okay, that's great.
I'll take a motion.
I'll go ahead, Megan.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, I move that the select board approve Easy Green Genetix LLC alternatives for a local cannabis license for a tier 1 indoor cultivation facility located in White River Junction.
I will second that.
Give it a
Friendly
second.
amendment, can we add the application number? Or does it not need to be because of the state?
Thank you.
Okay, never mind.
I just want to note that the word alternatives is not part of our legal name. And so I don't know if that's important for the record, but it's Easy Green Genetix LLC. And I know in the email from the state, it said alternatives, Easy Green Genetics. And so I think they just took that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's important, but for the record,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second discussion. Lanny?
Yeah, I am going to support this. I'm going to vote yes for this. However, I'm going to restate again that I feel that town of Hartford is done a major disservice because they do not have the information surrounding locations in the town of Hartford. And I certainly hope that that taxpayers or voters will consider this in the future.
Rocket, did you have a?
My understanding that is set at the state level. And that I wanted to say, Stephanie, while you're here, I remember 2 years ago, you being passionate about this and an advocate of this, were getting citizen signatures to force this on the ballot. And I remember how close you were before the select board actually approved it. I understand that cannabis can be controversial. And I understand, but I would say that I think just having seen you and Kendall operate, you guys take it very, very seriously. And I retrospectively, 2 years after the fact, think that it was a pretty cool democratic, there's an example of civic engagement and a democratic process to go ahead and create that. And I think that this on net will be a good thing for a town, especially if we can keep our licensees accountable and acting responsibly, which I'm sure you absolutely will. So I wish you the best of luck.
Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Dan here.
Get banned. I think it's unanimous. Imagine it's unanimous.
Dan, you're good, right? Yeah, okay.
Okay, so we will end this portion of the local cannabis control board and reopen as the Hartford Select Board. Order of agenda, I don't think there are any changes, so we'll go to public comments.
Can we-
Okay, public comment, we'll start with people in the room and then we'll go to those who are joining us on Zoom. If you'd like to speak, please come up to the microphone, identify yourself and town and village of residence, and you will have 5 minutes, no personal attacks. Anybody in the room?
There'll be one person that's coming in, just move into the other one.
Okay.
Circle around.
Okay, let's go to Zoom then, first, and then we'll circle back.
Okay, Marcy Bartlett, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Marcy?
Marcy?
Marcy, are you with us? Are there any other hands up on Zoom? We can always come back to Marcy.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna try for Marie. Marie, do you want to go ahead?
Great. Hi, Marie Elvin, White River, Vermont. My question was on the park and ride and the fence. I know it was brought up 2 or 3 meetings ago about closing that fence in at the park and ride, and didn't know if anybody, if there has been any discussion about that or not.
I believe Public Works went out to take a look at it, and right now with all the vegetation, I guess they couldn't really do a lot. Is that, Gail?
That
We'll
is
have to wait and
correct.
look at
That
it.
was discussed at the previous meeting that we were at.
Okay, so are they thinking of putting one up, or they just can't do it now because of all the the growth?
I don't know if it's, they have to wait to get a better assessment of it once the vegetation is removed. So I think that's kind of where we are. They can't do it right now, but they'll take a look at it and then see if it's suitable, I think, for a fence.
Okay, and then I didn't know if Ally had any, it just surprised me that there's been 2 people who've quit the homeless committee, and if there was any reason given why these people have come off of the committee, or that just seems unusual that people would join the committee and then turn around and quit.
Sure, I could speak to that. So I think turnover on volunteer committees is a pretty regular occurrence. You know, we understand that folks are volunteering out of honestly the goodness of their hearts. And in terms of specific reasons that folks who resigned from the committee gave, it was largely due to, you know, conflicts, availability, things like that. Information I was given was not related to, you know, anything about the committee operations or not being interested in the work anymore, but just, you know, personal circumstances that affected their time commitment to serve. So again, that's not exclusive to the Housing and Homelessness Committee. That's something we've seen resignations across committees as well, just because, again, the nature of volunteer work.
No, okay, thank you.
And we do have someone who is seeking appointment to that committee tonight, so.
Yes, I saw that. Yes, I know Nancy. Good for her.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and I knew Pat and Sandy too, so I was kind of concerned. I haven't talked with them directly about why they decided not to continue on. And one other question, I've had a couple of people ask me about that hotel on Route 14, and I guess there's homeless people that are being sheltered there, and I don't know, a couple of people were concerned about that. I didn't know if you heard anything in the meetings, Kim.
I haven't heard anything. I don't know if anyone else has. I believe it was at some point used for shelter, right? During the emergency housing program. I don't know currently what's going on there.
No, so it was used for emergency housing.
I believe it was during the pandemic. Yeah,
I don't know. Somebody was telling me that they were looking to do something else to that, and they were kind of surprised, and they just asked me if I had heard anything about it, and I had not. So I thought I would bring that up.
Sure.
And see.
Yeah, I don't think we have any news on
If it is, it's a question of the state, not the select board.
Yeah, very likely. Thanks, Bernie. Anything else?
The state, huh? Interesting. I would think that would be a zoning question. Anyway, what else? I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. And then do we have Marcy still with her hand up?
Let's try. She said she just emailed to say I'm here, but you couldn't hear me. Marcy, can you just try again? Maybe check your microphone setting and for your volume on your computer.
Marcy?
Can she call it?
Or can she email her question?
Yeah, I don't know if can you email your question to us maybe, or it sounds like we're just having some difficulty since we can't hear you. Doesn't seem like it's coming through, so.
Yeah, I guess,
Marcy, if you want to email us or something, please do so we can get your comment or answer any question that you have. But since we can't hear you, we should probably keep the meeting going.
just, say here. Sorry, I don't mean to-
I can reply to her
Okay,
email and say
that's fine.
please.
Is there anyone else on Zoom?
No other hands up at the moment.
Okay, back to the public comment in the room. Well, doesn't appear that there's anyone here to comment.
The resident next door with the police chief, I'm not sure if he realizes it's time for public comment.
We could always come back.
Yeah, I mean, we can't just wait. I mean,
Yeah.
if people, if they're here, they can comment. If they're not, then we need to move on. So we'll go to select board comments and announcements. Laney, you got anything?
No, I was approached about the parking down to the Quechee Pocket Parks today, though. Apparently on the, I guess you'd say the eastbound side of the Quechee Village Bridge in the parking lot there's been some spaces that have been marked up there by Simon Pierce for Simon Pierce parking only. And there was a question about that being town parking versus Simon Pierce parking. So I believe that it's a town lot. And I don't know why Simon Pierce is marking that as Simon Pierce parking only. So perhaps we could look into that and get some clarification on that.
Okay, sounds good. Rocket?
Yes, I saw in the packet that we had 2 members of our fire department promoted. So I just wanted to congratulate Captain Will LaLiberty for 14 years of service and Lieutenant Brett Quilia. Apologies for any mispronunciations, for 4 years of service. And to also welcome Gabrielle Poole, who I guess just joined the HFD as a deputy fire marshal. And then Gail, this is my understanding, this will be your last meeting leading us as the acting town manager. So I just want to continue the thank you parade we've been having for the last few weeks. So thank you. It's an honor to serve this town. Thanks.
Thank you. Ally?
No comments from me, but Marcy did just email us her question. We could, which I can happily share for the
Sure.
record. So Marcy is asking, please update me on why the Department of Public Works hasn't asked for funding in this agenda. I'm not sure if Gail, you could speak to that.
That's, I think, the capital.
That is I think that's explained within the packet. If we read the packet, it's so that the DPW could focus on projects that they have ongoing. So if we read the packet, that's an explanation within that.
Well, and point of order that this is an agenda item.
Yeah. So we will dive into that more fully on the when we get to that part of the agenda. Anything else, Ally? Mary?
Nope, I would, as second or third or fourth, my kudos to you, Gail. You've done a remarkable job and we all appreciate it.
Dan?
Just to say, nothing to share, just thank you, Gail, and also Paula for your leadership. It's great having someone on board that knew the system, knew the people, and knew the town, and knew the finances, just to make this a smoother transition as it could possibly be. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Kim?
Ditto.
Ditto.
Thank you, Gail. And nothing else for me.
All right, I just wanted to give a shout out to Ian Duffy. Scott helped me figure out his name. He was part of a crew that transported my mom from the village to DHMC on Saturday night, and she's fine. And he was a great guy, very graceful. And I told him I'd give him a shout out. So thank you, Ian. All right, so appointments. We will consider the appointment of Nancy Trottier to the Committee on Housing and Homelessness for a 2-year term beginning September 19th, 2023 and ending September 18th, 2025. Nancy, if you want to just come up and identify yourself, tell us about your interest in the committee.
Hi. Well, I don't totally understand exactly what the commitments will be, but I can tell you a little bit about myself.
Sure.
Lifelong resident of Hartford. a social worker at the hospital, and just very interested in homelessness, housing, sort of how that all is maximized, really. I know there's much housing problems everywhere and homelessness everywhere. So I think number one, I want to understand it from a Hartford perspective, and I want to be able to help in any way that I can on the commission. And maybe you could explain just a little bit about what the commission does, because I didn't quite hit that paperwork.
No, sure, Ally, do you wanna?
Yeah.
Just a short version, fine.
Sure, yeah, I can keep it brief. Thank you. Thanks, Nancy. And thanks so much for applying. So I'm the liaison to the committee. So in terms of the commitment and what the committee is working on, its charge is really looking at, opportunities through understanding more about different, regulations we might have in the town of Hartford, as an example, that might be impeding and or able to facilitate the development of housing, also to help with community engagement and letting folks know in the community more about some of the issues at play, what the town is doing, and how to get involved, and then also other ways to address homelessness as well. That's the short version. So the committee right now, it was formed, oh gosh, I want to say back in July of last year, but it meets once a month. So it's sort of been a very just intentional, methodical process in the past year of getting the committee formed and then actually starting to scope out its work plan, so short-term, medium, long-term goals. And one of the things it's been working on too is the town's in the middle of updating its housing chapter for its town plan, so the committee will have a role in actually continuing to forward that work of the housing chapter. And in terms of the commitment, the committee meets once a month on the third Thursday of each month from 6 to 8 o'clock in town hall.
Yep, that's not a problem. Thank you.
Any questions for Nancy? Lynn?
And Nancy, I noticed that you put down that your work at DHMC as a social worker, and you put down addiction there. Do you believe that addiction is one of the major contributors to homelessness in Hartford?
I think poverty is probably a major contributor to homelessness. I think addiction is one of the issues that are a factor, but I don't think it necessarily is a causing factor.
So do you feel that addiction, if there is addiction among the homeless population, that needs to be solved first? Or does the housing situation need to be solved first?
I think they both need to be solved. I don't think you can solve one without the other. I do a lot of other work with addiction, mostly in New Hampshire, because that's a program they have, but a lot of people with addiction issue are homeless. So it's really hard to help them with their addiction issues if they're homeless and can't get connected to resources because they are homeless. So I think it's both. I don't think there's one that you can address one and solve one before you solve the other. I don't think they're solving either of them, to be honest with you. I think it's addressing them, treating them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Nancy? No, I'll take a motion. Rob?
Mr. Chair, do we have a suggested motion? Mr. Chair, I move that the select board appoint Nancy Trottier to the Committee on Housing and Homelessness for a 2-year term beginning September 19th, 2023 and ending September 18th, 2025.
I will second.
And we have a second from Ally. Any discussion?
There's a hand up. I don't know if that would,
There's a hand up on this particular issue.
I don't know, a hand just went up.
Okay, well, I guess.
I think
I mean, okay, who is it?
it's Mike Morris.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Mike, did you want to comment on this application?
Yes, I do have a question about this with the homelessness. And I guess my question would be to
Can you introduce yourself first?
Mike Morris, Hartford, Vermont. Anyways, to Mr. Trottier and in the select board that, well, I understand from our health officer at the time, Brett Mayfield, a few years back, that like we had like 23 homeless people in the town of Hartford. I don't know what the count is now. But of that, there was only 2 that he could say was justified homeless. The rest elected to be homeless. And what's the board and Ms. Trottier's feelings about handling that type of situation when it comes down to our tax dollars at work here for the benefit of everybody, of course, and not to leave anybody out, but just that some people are there by choice. And how do we plan on handling that? If there's any plans at all. Thank you.
Nancy, if you want to answer, you can.
I think it's hard for me, in the work I've done for 30 or 40 years, to think of someone choosing homelessness as sort of like a choice. Do they sometimes choose to live in that manner because they don't see the other options as being something that's helpful to them or something they feel safe in for whatever reasons? But I think hard for me to think people choose homelessness. It's not fun to be homeless.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any
Yeah.
more discussion?
I would just briefly respond and say, I've actually met people who have chosen, albeit often in different climates, but.
Okay, let's remember this is
But
an
anyway.
appointment.
Right.
that we're
That's
considering.
what
We have a
I'm happy to
motion and a
vote.
second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you for volunteering to be part of the committee.
Looking forward.
Yeah, excellent.
So it's this week, first meeting. Is this the third Thursday?
We do have a meeting, yeah, this Thursday at 6.
And it's here.
And it'll probably be in room 2, but I can send you an email just to make sure you
Okay.
know where to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nancy. Okay, significant activity report. Any questions for Gail or any highlights, Gail, that you want to share with us?
I have a few highlights. First one is from Parks and Recreation, the ribbon cutting of Radcliffe Park, new beginner friendly dirt bike track took place on September 13th. We want to thank Emily Stavriks. I apologize, Emily. And on the Right Track project for not only coordinating the event, but organizing the community effort to build the track. Hartford Parks and Recreation and all our new and avid bikers appreciate that what Emily has done. We look forward to continue our relationship and bringing more experiences like this to other parks. One other item from Parks and Recreation, the department continues to work with the World War I Monument Committee. We anticipate the foundation for the monument to be installed this fall. Lowry Property Services will be donating their services to dig the area for the foundation. World Tech was on site to look at the information kiosk in Veterans Park, and they will be looking to restore the legs and sandblast and repaint. Then from our assessors department, Christina Tardy, she's our assistant assessor. She recently received the Stephen Jeffrey Rising Star Award as part of Vermont Assessors and Listers Association, their mission to promote education. And then I think a couple of you have already mentioned 2 promotions at Hartford Fire Department, Captain Willa Liberty and Lieutenant Brett Quilla. And then also a very warm welcome to Gabrielle Poole, who is our new Deputy Fire Marshal. And then open for any questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand there's crossover between departments and Public Works. I just noticed that Water Department removed the speed bumps down on down in wherever Hartford Village that is. I'm just surprised to see them removing speed bumps versus the Highway Department. But I thought they were both pretty busy for tasks. So was there a specific reason for that, or?
I would say staffing. And we certainly do cross over on many areas.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I just thought that was strange to see that. So that's it.
Rocket?
Just want to reiterate my request, if we could get the HFD report done in a table form, just because it's hard to understand what all these percentages mean and look like in the current format. Although I do like a statistical breakdown like that. It's great. And then the other is that I noticed that the incidents, the call log for the HPD is down like over 25%, it seems like, from typically over 400 to under 3. That to me is a great thing, but I was just wondering, I know Chief Sheldon's around, so it's kind of a question specifically for him, unless you have an answer, but I thought that was great. But I was also a little alarmed by the sex offender registry being at 17 calls. I don't know if it was the same thing, but seems that we typically have a lot more directed patrols and whatever. So I just was looking at that and hoping for some clarity.
Sure, I think those are great questions. I'm going to go grab the chief, but in the meantime, I'm going to ask Chief Cooney if you can. Do you think the percentage, the formatting that Rocket's asking about?
I think it'd be great, Rocket, if you have this chat and so we better understand what you're looking for a presentation of the data.
Oh,
That's basically a canned report that's
Yeah.
in our software.
yeah.
So, yeah.
If they could export it simply as an Excel sheet with just the lines down, tracing
Oh,
down,
sure.
so that way we just know what column each number is associated.
Associated with.
That's
Yeah,
all it
That's
is.
simple.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Oh, I guess, while we're on this topic of your department and HPD, there was a pretty alarming incident that happened here in town in White River Junction with a car theft and an incident on 8991. So I just wanted to send my heart out to both your departments because that sounded like a pretty traumatic circumstance to be a part of. So just want to reemphasize our thanks to both your departments.
Yeah, very appreciative.
Chief Sheldon, do you mind either going to the podium or coming over here? The board members have some specific questions regarding your significant activities report.
Hi, Chief. Just a couple questions. One, I was noting that the overall call volume seemed to be significantly lower than other biweekly reports we get, which I think is a great thing. And I was wondering if you could just comment on that. And then it seemed like maybe there are fewer directed patrols, but then I was also just looking down that list and I was pretty alarmed by the sex offender registry number being at 17. And I don't know, again, that could be the same incident, multiple calls about the same incident, but maybe if you could just help break down some of those numbers, the best of which being the reduced call volume, I guess.
I think part of the reduced call volume can be associated with the fact that there are certain calls that, we frankly have decided we're not going to go to. If your 10-year-old is out of control and you don't want to be the parent, you're not going to send an officer over to be a parent, because then that child grows up not liking anybody in a uniform. That takes the part. That's part of it. That's a small part. We don't get a lot of those, but we get a lot. We get enough. Just yesterday, a woman said, "Am I calling you because the kids next door are screaming and playing too loud? We come over and handle the nuisance." I said, "No." So we understand the cultural shift in the community that we're not going to be here doing all that kind of work. That's some of it. Some of it is time of the year, fall's coming, cold weather, things like that. Things tend to slow down towards the winter.
Right.
Sex offender registry that comes around periodically, and we have to go out and do the checks. So you will see a number that will jump up occasionally whenever those checks are done.
Okay. And so then just on your first note of a departmental policy change in terms of what you're responding to, the call log should be seen and interpreted as calls that then HPD actually responded to.
Yes.
Not necessarily calls that came in.
Yes. When you look at, I don't know the numbers exactly for Hartford yet, but about 80 to 85% of the calls that we get in the dispatch center are not criminal in nature, quality of life, which is something that you're going to see in the CIP and in my future budget proposals.
Right.
Less police officer responses, more community resource liaison responses.
Right.
Sorry, Chief, we're getting a comment to ask you to speak into the microphone.
How's that?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. And I guess my one confusion with that is the top line being hang up calls, it's 10. But that means that you guys then went and responded.
Yeah, 911 hang up. A lot of times, not a lot of times, but there are occasions where people will call 911 and then hang up because they know we'll respond and they don't feel safe to talk on the phone. Domestic violence situations in particular.
I see. But that does mean an officer went and responded to that.
In most of those cases, yes.
I see.
On a rare occasion, we might be able to call back if it's a repeat and say, "Are you okay?" The old phone systems, you dial 9 to get out, and then 1 for long distance. You get 911 a lot with that, but that seems to be not as big of a problem anymore.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can we just add to that, like as as a shopkeeper, often a bunch of us having one person in their shops at a time, we've been instructed that that is an option for us. Like if we don't feel safe, we can pick up the landline or the phone or whatever, quick, call and just put the phone down, and that it's like, so that's kind of a reassuring option to some the business community as well.
Okay, everybody good? Any other questions about the significant activity report? Okay, well, we're gonna move on then to our RFP presentation. So we're gonna hear two tonight, from Think Again and from Kulik. So each organization will get 15 minutes to do the presentation with 15 minutes for Q&A. We do have a set of scripted questions and we do need to stick to those. Also, if we go over and the first group gets 35 minutes, we have to offer that amount of time to the other group as well. We have to do everything we can to make sure that we ask the same questions and that we're fair. If you can follow up, if it's to clarify the answer to the question. But we don't really, it's not an opportunity just to sort of freewheel, have a freewheeling discussion with them. It's really, they're going to make the presentations and we have a set number of questions. Lanny did provide us with our matrix for scoring, so it's very helpful.
1 to 10.
Who wants to do the questions? They can just do it once we get the presentation.
And
Yes,
can I also just, for full disclosure, I spoke with VLCT today just to make sure that there wasn't a perceived conflict of interest. I have a friendship relationship with one of the consultants from Think Again, who lives in my neighborhood, and also with from Vermont Partnership for Diversity. Myself and Ellie have had coffee with Mary Gannon a couple times. So I wanted to just disclose that I have like a superficial personal relationship. I still feel like I could be impartial in those assessments, but if anyone has concerns about it, then we could discuss that.
So I think we're ready to bring them over if they're there. So the first presentation is going to be by Think Again. I believe their contact me to say Davey.
Yes. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you for coming in. So this first part is just for you to sort of give us your presentation, and then for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have time for some Q&A after that. So the floor is yours, whoever you'd like to start.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for making the time. We really appreciate the opportunity to clarify, give a little overview, and answer any questions that you might have. I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself and my team, and then hand it over to my colleague Kendra, who will describe a little bit about our approach. And then I'll add, we were asked to speak to whether the original proposal could be scaled down at all. So I'll speak to how that might look.
Great.
So you should be able to see my shared screen now, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So my name's Davey Schlasko. I'm the director of Think Again Training and Consulting, and we are a team of about 20 consultants, many of them part-time, who bring a range of different expertise and perspectives to the work. Our focus in all of our work is around fairness and inclusion in organizations and communities, and we do that through assessment as well as training and consulting and other methods. Our process is always collaborative, so we are not coming in to just dip in and gather data and then tell you what to do, but to really collaborate with stakeholders in the town to figure out together what's going to make most sense in this context and how best to do it in response to the needs and opportunities that emerge as the project moves forward. Of the team, the 4 people who would specifically be most involved with this project are listed here on this slide, and more detailed bios are in the original proposal. Kendra will introduce herself shortly. Our colleague Chelsea Branham, who's not with us today, is a former state legislator in Oklahoma and has done a lot of consulting with municipalities, public agencies, tribal nations, and also other kinds of organizations. And then me, and then our colleague Janae, who's also an organizational consultant and school administrator. Most of the in-person work would be conducted by me and Kendra because we are Kendra is very local, and I'm local enough to come visit. The other folks might come out once or twice, but most of the local work would be conducted by the two of us.
Great.
Kendra.
Hi, everybody. Kendra Colburn here. Nice to see you. I am zooming in from the bustling metropolis of Hartford Village, where I am very thrilled that somebody removed the speed strips. Very grateful they were there, though, because I do walk my dog on Summer Street daily, and it was really helpful to have folks slow down. So thanks to everybody who had a hand in any of that. Tonight, I'm glad to talk with you all a little bit more deeply about this proposal. As you probably read in the original proposal, we come at this kind of safety assessment from something called trauma-informed community engagement. This is an approach that we developed during Davey and my work with our previous business, Equity Solutions. We developed it in coordination with our work with the Mount Ascutney Prevention Partnership, and other clients such as the COSU, the Consortium on Substance Use in Windham County, and other Windsor and Windham County clients. So we've used this approach to think about things like public safety, like marginalized folks, and how to engage well with people that we know we might not be engaging well with, right? That we know that our traditional approaches might not be working well for. And as it says on the slide, part of this approach really is about building trusting relationships with a variety of people, and particularly with those people who are most impacted or most harshly impacted by the hardest issues our communities are facing. So we know that different stakeholders require different engagement tactics. So an anonymous survey might be perfect for some folks in our community who have things like regular internet access, high levels of reading and comprehension, et cetera. For other folks in our communities who don't have those pieces, they might not be very helpful, and we will probably not get the kind of information that we are seeking. And so we bring in other pieces like focus groups with specific kinds of scripts to help build relationships with people, to help put folks at ease, and sometimes follow up one-on-one conversations with folks for whom their experiences might be something traumatic or something that they aren't ready to talk about in front of other folks and aren't able to talk about in an anonymous survey or that kind of more broad tool. So essentially, our approach requires a variety of ways, of tools for reaching different kinds of folks as we think about the nuanced idea of what community safety is and for whom we want community resources to be safe. Anything that you'd like to add to that, Davey?
I guess, well, part of what you mentioned earlier, I'd like to bring in as far as thinking about social determinants of health, and that a lot of what we talk about as social determinants of health are also determinants of belonging and being able to access the feeling of safety as well as the reality of safety. So that is very much related to what we're talking about when we talk about the people who are most impacted by the hardest issues in our community, and really wanting to find ways to engage them that work for them.
Thanks for that. So the process that we proposed has multiple parts. I'm going to just walk through them briefly. It starts with, if we were to get this contract, we would want to begin by meeting with folks and creating a task force of probably around 5 local people who have some existing relationships in the community. That would include some town employees, we hope. And our role would be to guide these folks to identify and figure out how to contact stakeholder groups. Who needs to be contacted and how can that happen? So The how piece being we would train folks to collect data through specific kinds of trauma-informed focus groups and other methods, surveys, one-on-ones, et cetera. And then we would facilitate this task force through the process of interpreting the data after they have collected it. And so approaching it this way, as opposed to me and Davey just come to town and knock on doors and ask people if they feel safe, doing it this other way helps to assess the current situation, but it also helps to strengthen relationships with community members most often overlooked by standard engagement strategies like just a simple survey, which doesn't really build a relationship at all necessarily. But those 5 folks being seen, being experienced by community members helps to build up trust, and it builds up trust in the municipality as well. And it builds the town's capacity to continue using these really helpful engagement strategies with all kinds of stakeholders and assessing progress into the future so that, in our ideal world, we don't come back every 5 years. The folks in the town are able to do this on their own. So the sample project plan that we came up with, phase 1 would be this baseline discovery. We as a team would review whatever existing data exists. So I'm thinking about DHMC's community health needs assessment that I know they do regularly, taking a look at that, taking a look at other pieces of data that you folks in the town bring to us, so that we can learn enough to know who might be helpful on the task force. The next phase would be design and development, where we recruit and convene a task force. Again, that hopefully includes town employees, as well as other local folks who have good connections in the town, whether that be through their work, whether that be through their volunteering, et cetera. And then facilitate the task force to think through what are the specific goals, and what specific data collection tools are going to help achieve those goals. So designing surveys, designing focus groups, designing one-on-ones, thinking about the scope of those, thinking about the questions that need to be asked, et cetera. After that, phase 3, we would train task force members and possibly additional implementers if the scope is broad enough and the budget is big enough, right? For the scope to be broad, we need more than 5 folks to actually conduct surveys, door-to-doors, focus groups, et cetera. We train folks in how to use the tools that have been designed. And then phase 4, they go out and go ahead and collect that data. So that's interviews, focus groups, survey rollout, et cetera. Phase 5, then once all of that data has been gathered, that's when we come together with the task force and we all sit down and figure out what the heck does this mean? What does it mean that XYZ person from this neighborhood said Y, right? How do we interpret that? What does that tell us about community safety as a whole? And then the last phase, phase 6, is sharing. We write up a preliminary report, which we share with the relevant actors in the town, the manager, the fire chief, police chief, and the task force, et cetera. Go ahead and discuss that with them, get feedback from those actors, and then we finalize that report and submit it to the town.
Thank you, Kendra. I want to add 2 things. One, in the implementation phase, we would also be doing some of that implementation because there are really big pros and cons to having local implementers. People who have existing relationships in the community, for some folks, it's going to be way easier to have trusting, honest, thorough conversations about safety with people they already know. For some people, it might be harder. Maybe they have existing relationships. Maybe they also have existing friction. And so we're able to come in and do some of those focus groups, some of those one-on-ones where it makes sense to have somebody who's a little bit removed, either literally, I don't live there, or even Kendra just being in a professional role rather than as a community implementer, can have a different impact on different stakeholders. So we want both of those to be available. The other piece I just wanted to expand upon is Kendra talked about earlier, these 3 goals that this process accomplishes at once. And that one of them is to strengthen the relationships within the community. The way I think about this is that you can't assess something without changing it. Even asking people what makes them feel safe or unsafe starts to change how they think about safety. And so knowing that the assessment is also inevitably an intervention, we want to make sure it is an intervention in the direction of community trust and belonging and safety. I'll just briefly review sort of options for scaling the project and then be happy to take your questions. So on the left is our original proposal, and on the right is the minimum viable version that we came up with. Anything in between these two is also possible. So ideally, we would envision a 15 to 18-month process. Hypothetically, it's quite possible to do it more quickly, but in real life, when we're convening a task force, we have to think about their schedules. That might take a little while. Some outreach will really be easier in warm months, et cetera. The overall budget for that would be $123,000 for consultants, and then about 580 hours of work, or up to that much, divided among 5 or more task force members and local implementers. We made a hypothetical budget for what that would cost if some of that work was not performed by town employees, assuming town employees could do it on the clock, and what it could look like to pay folks on a contract basis. And the reason that that would be important is that part of what we need in task force members is people who have close relationships with communities directly impacted by hard issues. So some of them will not have the flexibility in their lives to be able to do unpaid work for something like this because they need to get paid to support themselves and their families. So to make this kind of work accessible to the folks we most need being part of it, it would be important to have some payment available for that. On the right, a more pared down version could look like a 10 to 13-month process, $55,000 consulting fee, and closer to 300 hours of work divided among the 5 or more task force members and other implementers for a total cost of around $61,000. To get a little bit clearer about the implications of these 2 different versions, for our ideal, very thorough and robust version, we would anticipate receiving in-depth qualitative input from a wide range of stakeholders. Whereas with the pared down version, we will reach fewer stakeholders or get less detailed input. And part of our work with the task force can be to prioritize weighing those 2 factors, how many people we reach versus how detailed the input could be. For an ideal version, a really robust community process builds trust, buy-in, and lasting relationships. A pared down version would still be building trust and buy-in, but probably not as broadly. There would still certainly be some stakeholders who would not fully believe in the process or trust the outcomes. In our full version, there would be some flexibility to pursue some more time-intensive engagement as needed. So if people really didn't feel comfortable sharing their thoughts in a focus group and needed more one-on-one. And part of what we know from understanding research on what works in a trauma-informed approach to anything is that people who have been traumatized, including simply by living in poverty, even if there's no more specific trauma than that, often may need a more personal, relational, and slow approach. And so that provides a little more flexibility for that. The minimal version would have less flexibility and would definitely have to rely on town staff for administrative and logistical support around scheduling and stuff like that. So I'm happy to share the slides with you by email so that you can have them later.
That would be great. And I think we're getting to the 15 minutes, so we do want to have a chance to ask you some questions.
Well, that's all we have, so we're excited to take your questions.
Great, thank you very much for the presentation. Board members, we have our questions. Anyone want to kick this off?
Sure. Davey and Kendra, thank you so much for being here and for putting this together. A question for you to start is just could you share more about your experience working with rural communities and how you would apply what you've learned from that experience to working with Hartford's community?
I can start, Davey. Yep. Happy to talk about that. I am from Vermont. I grew up in Tunbridge, which is a pretty darn rural community, and have lived in Hartford for the last 4 years. And pretty much all of my consulting and training has been done in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, in the Northeast. So most of it in pretty rural communities specific to this area. One thing that I have really noted and work hard around is the balance between, when we think about equity and inclusion, the balance between the very low number of folks of color who live in this state, and the very high number of white folks who live in poverty, balancing how we think about those two facts and how we allocate our efforts and our energy to make sure that everybody who is experiencing some kind of marginalization, whether that be racism, whether that be poverty, whether that be ableism, et cetera, make sure we are thinking about all of those folks and seeing how those folks overlap a lot of times, and how their issues intersect. That is huge in rural spaces, especially around here. And I'll say I've seen folks not do it very well when they aren't from here and they don't understand the nuances. So that's one huge piece. Another piece is just that folks trust people they know, right? And my experience in Vermont has been, my mom moved to Tunbridge almost 40 years ago, and it wasn't until her 35th year living there that she was invited to midnight mass. It takes a minute to trust folks. And so that relational approach that we keep talking about, that is really important if you really want to get to talk to people who aren't the ones who are just going to fill out the survey. Anything you want to add there, Davey?
I think you really said the most important things. I'll just add there's obviously some logistical pieces as well, and we know the importance of making it possible for people to participate in places that are easy for them to get to, given the transportation options that they have, given the internet access that they have, et cetera.
Great. Okay, Mary?
Yeah, I think you've partially answered some of this, but how will you reach members of our community who may not be engaged or who may be historically excluded from municipal activities and resources?
I can start with that, Kendra, and I'd love to hear what you want to add as well. Part of it really is relying on local expertise, and not like both Kendra as local expertise, but also local expertise from more than one person with different perspectives in town in this task force, to help us understand exactly who needs to be reached, what might be in the way, why they haven't been engaged so far. And very often, although of course the details vary, part of why they haven't been engaged is because of trust and because of their capacity. And so finding ways to build trust and make it as easy as possible is a big part of that. We can also look to existing relationships, and that includes collaborating with service providers who are already doing outreach to unhoused people, for example, so that we're not always building relationships from scratch, but really building on relationships that already exist.
Yep, I would add that we wrote a 50-page workbook on this exact topic. Some folks may have seen it. It's been passed around Windham and Windsor counties in the last couple of years. And yeah, it has specific exercises and pieces in it. To Davey's point just now, I love to ask, okay, if we know that generally we're not reaching this group of people, who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows those folks, right? That's how it works. Then you start however far away you need to get, and then you work your way in to see how you can find relationships with those folks. So that is a really key piece of it.
Thank you.
Anyone want to ask the third one?
I think this, they did answer the third
Right,
one
yeah.
pretty thoroughly in their presentation. So I'm happy to jump in with the
Yeah,
fourth one, if that's
please.
okay, just if you could describe what your stakeholder interview process would be like, and if you can give examples of some of the actual interview questions you envision, like what kinds of information will you be seeking to gain through this data?
So the exact questions we will develop in collaboration with the task force, and that's because we could come up with some good hypothetical questions that would work in a hypothetical town, but we want to get really specific about how are these questions going to land for specific folks. And some of those questions may need to be different for different kinds of stakeholders. For stakeholders who we're talking to because of their professional role, like police officers, firefighters, et cetera, the kinds of questions might be different. Although I assume some of them are also residents, and so those questions could also be relevant to them. Part of our method as far as a trauma-informed focus groups, and this also applies to many one-on-ones, is to start with kind of thorough introductions, really getting to know each other and showing them that we are someone that they can trust with their complicated story. The kinds of data that we want to know in what ways people feel safe or not safe. And safe is a very abstract word, right? So we want to get more concrete about that. What does safety mean to you? In what ways do you feel physically safe and not? In what ways do you feel emotionally safe and not? In what ways do you feel supported or like the community cares about you or like you're part of something, right? That sense of belonging is often part of how people experience safety. Kendra, what would you add?
I think in terms of, as DV said, the specific questions are going to depend on the task force members who we collaborate with. But yeah, so this is a little bit tough to answer in the moment because I guess what I can say is we can develop some questions, and then part of the training for the people who are actually going to do those interviews is to put it in your words, not lose the meaning, but do not read it like a robot. Don't read it like you're a college professor. That is not connective. It's not how you build relationships with people. You need to say it in the language that makes sense for you as you tend to express yourself. So there's some flexibility around exactly what folks would say, but getting at the core questions that Davey mentioned. I also want to say that the exact goals are also going to be developed with town officials and with the task force. So our exact questions are going to rely on knowing what the exact goals are. What exactly do we want to find out? And what do we as consultants see in the initial review of data, right? Like, where do we see obvious or subtle gaps in community care according to the data that already exists? And that's going to contribute to what we want to ask as well. Hopefully that's helpful. We know it's a little bit less concrete than just handing you all a script that we already wrote, but we hope that not having a script and developing it is actually a better approach.
I'll add one more piece that a question that I have so far, unless it's already been answered in existing data, is about the services and resources that exist that are intended to help people be and feel safe. So we want to know from people, how are those working? How are they working well? How are they not working well? In which ways? If you don't feel safe accessing a service, what would need to change for you to feel safer with that kind of thing?
Great, and I think we have one last question, which is, how would you handle situations in which respondents are not comfortable answering personal questions?
Cool, well, they don't have to, that's part of it. I really think, everybody gets to decide how much they want to disclose, and that's fine. We also want to think way ahead of that situation to think what's going to make people most likely to feel comfortable disclosing as much as they would want to. Whether that's who should they be interviewed by. Some people maybe will respond a lot better to Kendra and others to me. Some people maybe would respond better by having a phone call with Janae in Cleveland because they would feel more comfortable talking with someone who's not white. And all of that can be available. As well as part of the script is the getting to know you at the beginning, and really saying like why I'm asking these questions. And if you don't want to answer a question, or if you're not sure the relevance of a question, like you always have choices about that. You can always ask questions about it. Really making it a collaborative conversation so that nobody ever feels like put off or pressured, but it's part of a real conversation.
Yeah, all I would add to that is that part of when we say flexibility in the plan, this is exactly what we mean. The flexibility to have time to think ahead and plan who might be best to talk with specific folks or specific communities. And the flexibility to, in the moment, even after we've done everything that Davey just said, and someone still is like, I'm just not going to be involved. The flexibility to say, okay, great. If in a week you change your mind and something comes to mind that you are comfortable sharing, why don't you go ahead and give XYZ a call and we'll set up a one-on-one at another time. That is the kind of flexibility we mean, so that we can really get at the tough nuts that we know you as a select board and the town folks want to get at, to really understand what's working and what's not working.
Okay, well, thank you both very much for the presentation and taking some time to answer our questions. And I think we appreciate it, and we will be in touch.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Great to meet you all.
Okay, we have a break now, and then we will hear from our second group presenting. Same idea as what we just did.
Did anyone keep track of how much time we took overall?
I think we were around like 26 minutes.
They're within 30 minutes.
Yeah, we were within 30 minutes. All right, so we'll be back at 7:15-ish.
That clock is wrong. Oh, no, it isn't. Yes, it is.
Well, we're back from our break. We're going to hear the next proposal. This is from Kulik Strategic Advisors. Tracy Kulik, I believe, is the person we'll be speaking with. And Tracy, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So is Tracy over, Jan?
I'm bringing her over.
Or someone
now.
bringing her over?
And Marcos. Okay, great.
Okay, great. Hi, Tracy.
Well, before we go in there, can we get a presentation? We get a copy of the presentation they did, their slide
Said
check,
they'd
the slide deck?
email
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sending it to you right now. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you.
Dale. And once we have Tracy over, we can kick this off.
Here goes. Marcos just put his
Or
camera.
Marcos, yep.
I am here. Tracy, go ahead. I'll be displaying the presentation right now.
Okay, well, welcome to you both. We allotted 15 minutes for the presentation and 15 minutes for question and answer session. Thank you for being here, and we'll turn it over to you to begin whenever you'd like.
Okay, Marcos, next slide. I'm Tracy Kulik. I'm the CEO and the founder of Kulik Strategic Advisors. We're a consulting firm that is dedicated to public health and social service entities. All of our clients are governments, whether they're local, regional, state, or we do have some federal clients. We do needs assessments, both human service needs assessments, even more specific topic needs assessments throughout the country. You see the map here. I've been in this arena for almost 30 years, Marcos for the last 12 years, and we have a staff of roughly 6 individuals. All of our work is done with the client, and we do community-based participatory research where we really are guided by you as a steering committee, and through the questions and answers from Gail, and Paula, we understood that to be the steering committee with the addition of the police chief and the fire department. And we would meet with you on a monthly basis to have feedback and to direct us in what we were doing, although we would do the bulk of the work and provide the materials, but get your feedback as to what would work given your goals. We're very skilled, particularly Marcos is, at engaging marginalized members of the community, people who are vulnerable or are historically hard to reach. We have always exceeded our targets of what we have said we're going to do to be able to really have valid data. At the bottom of the screen, we have a few example topics. I'm going to kind of do these slightly out of order. The first one that is representative is Napa, California. It's Napa County. And there we were asked to create a way to have a dashboard of input from marginalized groups specific to them being respected or included or the lack thereof. And this was something we developed with a number of the providers in the community. And we were able to leave that with them where they could use that and self-assess at any time, either their client base or out in the community for broader groups, health fairs, any kind of gathering. We are just starting with the town of Brookline, Massachusetts. We've done a lot of work historically in New England, particularly Connecticut, but we are starting on a human services assessment and gap analysis in Brookline, Mass. The two specific to law enforcement or even EMS, who we've worked quite a bit with, are Spartanburg County, South Carolina, where we did behavioral health assessment, and we were guided by a captain of the jail, and we're actually embedded mental health workers in the county jail to reduce recidivism and actually get them treated, diagnosed and treated. And also we worked with him in introducing sequential intercept theory, in which sounds very academic, but is pretty basic, in which we trained not only community-based organizations, but other community resources and peers in the community from the vulnerable populations to interrupt any kind of safety concern or potential violence and help to prevent it, and work at the lower level all through. We'll have a visual that shows you that a little bit more. In St. Louis, Missouri, we work with both the city and the county health departments to do an overall community health assessment. And there were actually hotspot neighborhoods that we worked with Lieutenant John Blaskowitz from the Metropolitan Police Department to really refine their violence prevention efforts. We are currently working also with Allentown, Pennsylvania, and there we're working a lot with their EMS folks on people feeling not only that they should request their services, but feeling good about that and feeling safe about that. And in particular, in addition to some lower income or minority groups, is the elderly, who have been reticent to call them when they really should have. Next slide. The next slide is just a quick graphic on the sequential intercept model. And all you see here, and it seems very academic, and there's been a lot of research on this, but that we start with the community and work through the specifics of not only community services, but when people feel they're in crisis, what do they do, how this integrates or coordinates with law enforcement or EMS, and when is this actually a behavioral health issue versus a legal issue, or could be a physical health issue, moving towards some of the more justice involved things. Here, particular subgroups of youth, juveniles, or some minority groups, definitely people with mental health issues. And then on to the jails and courts, where we embedded actual mental health clinicians in the jail to work on reducing their problems when they left, and we're trying to re-enter the community and not the prison or jail, and what happens in the community corrections environment. Next slide. Marcos.
Thank you, Tracy. The overall goals of the engagement really is to examine safety in the perspective from the perspective of different people from all different walks of life, backgrounds, who have experienced different safety experiences. We will be examining your police department, fire department, your town support for nonprofit organizations, with the goal of identifying unmet community needs and identifying ways to better address that. Our proposed project phases is in 5 phases. Our first one really bringing all the leadership together for this engagement and having an official project launch meeting. Our phase 2 is looking at all of the secondary data. And from that, if you don't have an existing resource inventory, we would develop an existing resource inventory customized to your community needs related to community safety. Our phase 3 really is the bread and butter of this engagement, and it's going to be the community engagement and the input from the wide, diverse community that people have in the city of Hartford. So this is going to be looking at and working with your residents, your providers, and collecting this input in a variety of formats. Phase 4 is the data analysis, and then phase 5 is prioritizing our findings, final report, and presentation. Our overall proposed timeline. Our proposed timeline really assures a 6-month tenure. This could be shortened given a budget cycle. Within the first 2 months of the engagement, we would have our project leadership come together. We would meet with the town manager. We would discuss really what we want all of this engagement to be and look like. We will develop any tools with your input and the input of our overall steering committee. We will identify our key informant interviews members and reach out to them. We will review any communication that's going to be going out publicly to your community to ensure that is culturally sensitive and that really portrays the message that we want to be displaying to our community. Our month 2, we will also, based on the results of that secondary research, we will map any hotspots of community safety concerns, and we will review and summarize all of that second data, as well as creating that resource inventory. Our month 3 and our month 4 is, again, that rich collection of your primary data and your residents. So we will be scheduling a 30-minute one-on-one web meeting with your key informant interviews. We will develop a customized survey that's going to be posted on the Town of Hartford website to elicit community input, in addition to a provider survey for your CVOs. We will be conducting listening sessions, focus groups, and identifying the issues both from a qualitative and from a quantitative perspective. And then month 4 and month 5, really this is summarizing all of the data, all of our focus groups, listening sessions, key informant interviews are going to be summarized on a theme basis, and we are going to be using the resident survey to really assist us in displaying, giving that story. We will also be scheduling and having an assessment called Forces of Change, where we're going to be looking at the social, political, and economic forces impacting your community. We will prioritize findings and develop recommendations, and then we will finalize the engagement with an executive summary, a presentation, and an infographic to be shared with your community. So how will our community engagement look like? Our goal is to have a customized approach. We are going to customize every tool, any approach that we do working with you to really cast a wide net for community engagement. We have key informant interviews. This could be anywhere between 20 and 30 one-on-one sessions. And you see here, anyone we can meet here, and this can include, this list could be expanded at any time. As far as our survey, we're going to be developing that survey in conjunction with you to be distributed through the Hartford, Town of Hartford website. And we're going to be having 2 focus groups. We do cast a wide net for community engagement and the different ways that we go by doing that. We're going to be doing it virtually, face-to-face, and then providing a 1-800 number phone for individuals that wish to complete a survey via phone. Our overall project deliveries is going to be—
I'll take this, Marcos.
Okay.
Our project deliveries are 6, and we'll also talk about what we think is differentiating in our last 2 minutes. We talked about the resource inventory that we would either create or refresh on essential community services related to community safety. We not only in that resource inventory have basic contact information, what is the agency, what are their days and hours of operation, but do they have targeted groups that they serve? For instance, disabled or people who speak a language other than English. Also, what is their capacity? With that, the resource inventory gives us a good foundation in addition to those profiles of the Town of Hartford. In qualitative research, we have the community themes, which is the perception of safety from the focus groups and from our stakeholder interviews. And in the stakeholder interviews, what we do, and with both of them, we actually ask them to define safety. We ask them to give their hypotheses, which truly are those. Many of them will be proven, many of them not, as to which subgroups they think are impacted, whether this is minorities, low income, certain neighborhoods, elderly, disabled. And then we work with the resource inventory and the profile and the survey with the residents to determine what gaps exist. And with gaps, what gaps are perception gaps? There things actually exist, but people are unaware of them. What are actual gaps that people all admit? We don't have that. It may be regional, it may be scarce if it is regional. And in this era, what are delivery gaps? There used to be those services, but they're not offered anymore due to funding, workforce shortages, many of them COVID, they shut down. As Marco said, we'll have an executive summary and a full narrative report with all the underlying data sets provided and a presentation that can be used for community presentations and an infographic that summarizes it for those people who don't like to read a lot on 1 to 2 pages. I think that's it, Marcos. We do have a next slide. Just as far as what differentiates us, and this closes our presentation, in addition to us being able to do these needs assessments in a very efficient manner, we can do this in 6 months, which is what we proposed, but we do have clients, we frequently have clients who say, we've got a budget cycle, we need you to be done in 4 months. There may be a little lag into that 5th month, which refining all the narrative, but all the findings are done. We can concurrently do certain steps with the analysis and the report. The other thing we're known for is being very practical, very, what are you going to do about it? Who are you going to do it with? Who's impacted? We are very skilled at getting to them, but the key thing is not to have all this effort go into this, and then you don't really know what you're going to do with it, what will have the most impact, what will have the most impact fastest, what is the budgetary ramifications of it. The final thing we bring to the table is, in addition to state funding for projects, we are very skilled at getting federal grant funding, and there is quite a bit of funding for rural entities for safety and for violence prevention. We would love to work with you. You see, over the years, this is about 13 million a year we're able to procure in awards for our clients. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. That was very helpful and informative. We have a few questions we would like to follow up with you on.
Sure.
Take these. Anyone on the board want to read the first one? All right, Allie.
I got a follow up to something that was stated though.
Is
there, I mean,
If you
is
want
it to clarify?
Yeah,
Answer, that's okay.
A clarification, I guess, on the price that you had indicated. I see 249K on this. Is that a correct number for the?
That is not us. Our total budget was 40,000.
Oh, 40, I'm sorry, 40,000. That's why I'm asking the question.
That's how much grant funding they got, it's 249 million.
Right, okay, but 40 what?
40,200 is there.
40 what?
40,200.
Okay.
Okay, Allie, question?
Sure. Thank you, Marcos and Tracy. Appreciate you taking the time to meet us. Our first question is, could you share more about your experience working with rural communities and how you would apply what you've learned from that experience to working with Hartford's community?
Sure. First of all, we work quite a bit with rural communities. We're very adept at working with them. Recent engagements include Rural Health Network of South Central New York, which was a 12-county consortium. We have also worked with Southwestern Virginia, and our experience with them is even more so than an urban environment where a lot of resources that exist. Rural communities often use regional or state resources, and as I stated in the resource inventory, might not really have the access they need to those. Even physical healthcare or behavioral healthcare, they may access using circuit riders that come from more larger communities, and that's just an economies of scale reality. In addition, isolation is really a key concern in rural communities. And knowing what is isolation, and people have chosen to live in a more rural area where they feel they have less congestion, less people involved in their life, versus who really is isolated or lonely and is in danger. And I think given community safety and the fact of rural lifestyle, that's important. I live in a rural area in North Georgia, and I was raised in a rural area right outside Erie, Pennsylvania. So I'm very familiar with that kind of lifestyle and what goes with it. Some of the subgroups that are really impacted by it, definitely minorities are a small percentage of your population, but could very well feel isolated. Older adults, very much so, and especially coming from a New England mentality where they're hardy and they want to do things on their own, but maybe shouldn't. And so that's our experience with rural communities. I think engagement with yourselves as a steering committee and the whole relational aspect of dealing with them, and the logistical one of what resources are really available, not just as a community, but as individual rural residents, like transportation or lack of any internet or computers.
Yeah, you partially answered this question, but how will you reach members of our community who may not be engaged or who may be historically excluded from municipal activities and resources?
So we actually develop a customized approach to really ensure that we are out meeting people, your residents, where they're at. We don't expect residents to come to us. We actually go to residents. We go where they are and meet them in a situation that they're in. We have done this going and meeting people under homeless individuals under bridges, shelters. We try to partner with your trusted community partners to identify those areas to best go there and reach and meet them in a culturally sensitive way that is going to make them feel comfortable in opening up to us and telling us their life story, because a big part of it is being able to attach that lived experience to the data and all the input that's being collected. Tracy, anything else on that?
No.
Okay. Good question.
Tracy and Marcos, does the proposal costs include any compensation or other incentives for community members to participate in the engagement process?
Marcos?
I believe it does include a gift card for residents. That usually, from our experience, is a motivator to bring in and allow them to participate and give us their input, give us their story. These gift cards are usually like a grocery gift card, a grocery store gift card. A lot of the things that we've learned from this is having that variety of it. Some individuals prefer a grocery store that has a gas station attached to it so they can use gas. We've learned that within the senior community, what they really prefer is, for example, a pharmacy gift card to assist with any copays. So we really try to learn and take that. So overall, yes, we have a gift card that participants will be receiving.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can you describe what your stakeholder interview process would look like, and maybe give us some examples of specific interview questions you might ask?
Sure. First of all, we would develop any of our tools, whether the stakeholder interview guide, the focus group discussion guide, the provider survey, or the resident survey with you. We would develop them, and then you would give us feedback based on your knowledge of the area. Important things like semantics, types of questions, even the sequence of questions. We try to keep these fairly brief, but very targeted. The types of questions we would ask. First of all, one of them in the stakeholder interview and in the focus groups, somewhat in the surveys, but is to define safety. That means very different things to different people at different ages, in different genders. So defining safety and defining that specific to key community resources. Do you feel safe calling the police? Do you feel safe being transported by EMS? do you feel safe at night? Secondly, something like the dashboard that we use for Napa County, California, and their respect and social inclusion. We went through a lot of testing with that dashboard. We'd be happy to share it with you as we send the presentation. And it's distilled down to 8 different categories and about 3 to 4 questions per category. But it really does give you a lot of insight as to where people don't feel they belong, which is a foundation of safety. With the stakeholder interviews specifically, we ask them about the resources too, and which ones they feel they're aware or exist, which are gaps. This is where you get a lot of different perceptions about this. As we said before in the presentation, we asked their hypotheses as to why certain subgroups or which certain subgroups feel not safe and what they think is being done or could be done. And then the expanded role of where community-based organizations, whether those physical health, behavioral health, social services, and police or EMS interact, and where they don't, because a lot of the transition points are where we see problems emerge.
Okay. And the final question, who'd like to ask that?
I'm happy
Sally?
to. Yeah, our last question is, how would you handle situations in which respondents are not comfortable answering personal questions?
Okay, we'll both take this one. Marcos probably is more skilled because he does a lot of the resident surveys or focus groups. But first of all, we would ask them if they're not comfortable answering either any questions or a specific one, why not? What about that question is a trigger to them? Not only helpful to engage that person if they're willing to be, but to use as a input for other people that we'll be talking to. Is it discomfort with the topic? Is that they have nothing to add? They don't really think it applies to them? Or here we go into the second place. It could be the venue or who's asking them. Oftentimes, Marcos and I say, well, we don't care who we attach to as long as one of us attaches. And so I'll have Marcos try it if that might work. It might also work where they prefer to not do a face-to-face. It always intrigues us that a number of low-income respondents will share a lot of information over a 100 toll-free long-distance call. But if they have to give their name or they are associated with a certain location, not so much. Very different from more white-collar respondents who will tell you everything in writing, but don't really want to be on a phone call. Marcos.
With that is first thing with any focus group or just talking to anyone, we let them know that they're not obligated to do so. So we want to make sure that they're also feeling, it goes back to a perception, am I feeling safe in the physical space that I'm in? So that's why it's important for us to meet the residents and the individuals in a place that they're feeling safe and comfortable. We do basically ensure that they're feeling comfortable. And we just continue to ask different type of questions. And if one of them is a trigger, like Tracy said, we want to make sure that we understand why. And will this also be triggering to other individuals as well? So we always try to maintain a respectful manner in any of our questions. But we do find that, at least from my experience, once you get a group talking collectively in a focus group, they do tend to share a lot. And a lot of it might be semantics, but you do get a lot, especially from the individuals who may be hesitant to responding.
And they do have the right to not respond. If they choose not to do the whole thing, that's their choice. We try to give them a card so that if they want to do it a different way or they reconsider it, they can. And we emphasize to them, they do not need to give us, first, last name, social security number. We just need to get the questions answered. And we don't get into it's very confidential what we hear from them, and we let them know we're not sharing their name. We are in aggregate sharing the themes of what we find out.
And that tends to be a big side of relief for individuals, knowing that it's at a high level theme, what we've heard collectively, knowing that their name or information will not be attached to anything they're saying directly.
Thank you both very much for taking the time. We appreciate the presentation. I believe you're going to email it to Gail so that she can share it with us. And thank you. We'll be in touch. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Okay. Well, now we're back to other board business.
Mr. Chairman, excuse myself. My mother's in town, so.
Yep, that's fine.
Out of here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rocket.
So let 'em on for me.
You invited her to the meeting.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Oh, exciting.
All right, Hartford speed study, longer than a Dickens novel. So I'm hoping maybe, Chief, you can give us like the bottom line. I mean, it seemed like a majority of the people driving through there who were clocked were either compliant or at low risk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot there, but you know, if we can, if you can just tell us, just tell us what we need to know, that would be wonderful.
So yeah, it is long. I broke down the Twin River study in real quick bullet points for you all because this is a long report.
Yeah.
Task Flats, southbound traffic was average speed 29.9. Northbound traffic was 38.3 miles per hour. The combined average for north and southbound on Task Flats for the study period they did was 34 miles per hour. So there are exceptions in both areas, outliers on both sides, but the average was 34 miles an hour.
So it was faster on the north side going up.
Faster northbound, yes.
Okay.
Now, Wilder by Ravenswood Terrace, their study was done there as well, and then the average speed for southbound was 30.8 miles per hour, so 31 miles per hour. Average speed for northbound was 27, and the combined average speed for both north and south at that location was 28.9. So that was below the speed limit. So in Rita's report out, she does state that her conclusion is there's not an excessive speed problem on Hartford Avenue, which is similar to what Dan Salamino's report says. So all that novel is down to that. That helps. So we are doing a lot of speed enforcement up there. 158 car stops in 8 months, almost 9 months is a lot. Well above average according to the experts. So which tells us that the guys are spending a lot of time up there, the officers. So that's a good thing for various reasons. But yes, there's a lot of action, and we're continuing to work on it.
Okay.
So,
questions, Kim?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that it was done, and I think that it will be great if it is also done during the school year. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be, the kind of the impetus for even looking at this statistically, was it rooted in the concerns about like the wanting a traffic study or like a volume of cars because of the concerns around the Haven and Twin Pines development? Like it seemed like, I'm just curious if that had any impact on doing the speed study. Like what was the origin story to doing the speed study?
I think part of it stems back from the desire to lower the speed limit to 25.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And
yeah, I believe we had a citizen come in and talk about, I think it was that area, right, where you kind of come down into like Wilder proper.
Yes. And based on the data I'm seeing, because the state has to do their own study before they'll be willing to change it because it's a state roadway. Based on the study I'm seeing, I don't think it meets that 85th percentile that they go by to reduce speed limit. So I think at this point, their state's not going to probably change the speed limit on our request or on our behalf. So,
Chief, based on the timing for between when it's triggered, is there any way to tell whether we're talking about tandem dump trucks, heavy duals, or
no way of telling?
So,
No.
I mean, that was a lot of the concern that was expressed is that we were getting, I mean, I remember distinctly said that there was buses and heavy trucks that were coming down through there at quite a clip. And due to the size of the vehicle, it is.
The stopping distance
It's
is
much
a
of
long
a
way.
delusion. It can seem like they're going faster than they really are based on the size of the vehicle.
Correct.
So I just didn't know if there was a way to distinguish between large vehicles or small vehicles.
Not with the device we have.
If you were to set up a counter, like the speed between axles, would that detect?
I don't know, honestly. The state has the strips on the roadway. We
Right.
have a sign that picks up the radar unit, picks up the speeding car or vehicle. There's two different technologies at play. I'm not sure if the state system can do that or not.
Yeah,
Ours
I
cannot.
just didn't know if the timing between, if it
Right.
picked up a timing between the duals or
Right.
between the tandems, whether it would actually, that would identify what's a heavy truck with a, dual axle, dual axles, tandems. So be worthwhile to see if that was something that was a process.
We will be doing another study on Hartford Avenue during the school session. In October, but that's permit dependent. We're still waiting for AOT to get back to us to give us a second permit to do with that study.
So it seems bottom line, state road, what we've gotten so far seems unlikely that there's such a discrepancy between the posted limit and what you're actually seeing people go. The
Correct.
state's probably unlikely to do something. If it's a state road, I mean, does that hinder us from like putting up like the here's how fast you're going signs or things like that, you know?
We have to get the permits for it.
You gotta get the permits for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our sign, if I remember correctly, we talked about our sign shutting off at a certain speed because we didn't want people trying to challenge the sign.
Oh, yeah.
How fast can I get the numbers, right? So the sign shuts off. It still records the speed, but the display shuts down at a certain speed. So we don't get that.
Okay.
That does happen, especially with the younger drivers.
Okay.
So we weren't willing to tolerate that. So we had it shut off, still gather the data and how fast they were going, but shut off the display.
Okay. And so it sounds like also during the school year, for some period of time, just doing a study again.
Yeah.
See what it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Is there any follow-up that could be done with the resident who originally broached this? I mean, I realize it's not necessarily our responsibility, but I think just in terms of good community communication, would that be something reasonable for just to follow up with that individual?
I've been in contact with that individual.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That wasn't as painful as it might have been when I was reading the agenda.
There's a lot of data there. That's,
There's
I mean,
a lot.
that's just,
I'm aware,
that's
yeah.
difficult to understand all that data, but.
Okay, so our next item is the ARPA reallocation request. We've got Chief Cooney.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So 2 years ago, the department was notified by our vendor that manages the municipal fire alarm system that they were sunsetting their product. And we would need to find a replacement by January 1st of 2024. So we started the process of investigating what other options there are for a software provider to take over monitoring and become the user interface for the municipal fire alarm system. We went out to bid, we budgeted about $35,000 in this current budget to do that after estimating it from some other vendors. We put it out for RFP, got only one response from one of the bigger alarm monitoring companies, SIS, originally for a total amount of, over $250,000, but that included all the hardware, new servers, new monitoring devices, and all that other equipment. So we worked with the vendor, the applicant to be the vendor, our IT department, and the people that manage it for me within our own organization. And they were able to eliminate duplication of some of the equipment that was being proposed and reutilizing the equipment we already own. And we were able to reduce that price down to about $89,000 for the project. Since we only had $35,000 budgeted, and we did have some ARPA funds that were allocated to the fire department for the refurbishment of engine 3, we did have some savings there on the original estimate, came in at about $340,000, of which you allocated $450 towards that project. So we're asking to use some of those funds to supplement the purchase of the municipal fire alarm system and to still hold those other funds in reserve should any unanticipated refurbishment costs come up. So that's the ask, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
So explain to me what the difference is going to be between the time somebody pulls an alarm, it goes to the radio box, and then where's it picks up from there? Is it gonna be, how is that gonna be processed, that radio box call?
Sure, all that base hardware stays. So the system that's in our community is the AES system. It's their radio telegraph radio box system. It's in this building, it's in the schools, it's in about 160 buildings so far. And as the fire marshal does inspections and plans reviews, we add more. But basically, when an internal system is activated in the building, it can be fire alarm, it can be burglar alarm, it can be the panic buttons that people have. It transmits through the radio channel up to the fire station through radio waves picked up on an antenna. And then the computer system, which is what we're talking about, reads that data, identifies its location, identifies the device that caused the action, whether it's a panic alarm in this room, at the high school or wherever, and dispatches either police, fire, or EMS, and pushes that to our CAD system. So basically, that's what's going to happen. Alarm happens at a building, travels through the radio waves picked up at an antenna, processes through this system, pushed to the computer-aided dispatching system, and the dispatcher sends a unit to handle.
So there's no different, not gonna be any lapse in time of.
No, in fact, it's going to be better because the system we have now, the dispatcher gets it on a separate, just because it's an older system. They see it on a display screen, they have to read it, look it up to where it is, manually enter the data into the dispatching system and send the unit. This system is an automatic transfer directly to the CAD, so it just pops up on their display screen and they dispatch the unit.
Is there any effect of loss of power, if there's loss of power?
Oh, it has battery backup systems and other backup systems built
Okay,
in.
so
Yeah.
that wouldn't affect the system then?
Nope, it's a mesh system, so if it loses connectivity with like the fire station, for example, it actually back feeds through the rest of the other antennas that are in the system and rebroadcasts that signal back to us. Yep.
Sounds good.
Yeah, this is probably a question more for Gail, but should, because these are ARPA funds, what's gonna happen as time goes on with projects that may, I'm gonna say, using this example, are under what we've allowed? What happens to those funds, and do they go into just one fund, or do they go into, it sounds like it's backup for them, but if this happens over and over in other ARPA areas that we've voted on, what do we do?
So you have to have them obligated by December 2024.
Right.
So we take a look at this quite frequently.
Okay.
And as it changes, we'll come back to you and say, the amount changed.
Okay.
I'm fairly confident that during this budget process, the balance that you have left in here will probably be used up.
Okay.
And if by chance the current projects that have allocated funds, if that does change, I'm more than confident that we can find places to spend that money.
Okay.
So no concerns with that. We just need to make sure that we're hitting the obligation deadline.
Right. That's what I was concerned about is, we've got to fit into that category where ARPA demands. So thank you.
We'll take a motion.
Sure, Mr. Chair, I move to authorize the acting town manager to award the purchase of a municipal fire alarm monitoring system to Security Information Systems, Inc., and reallocate $61,161.32 in ARPA funds from the fire engine refurbishment to the municipal fire alarm system replacement.
A second.
We have a second from Lanny. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Dan's got a thumbs up.
So 601, man. All right.
It's just 6 0. Oops, I see.
Yeah, wrong side.
Okay.
Very good. I think we're good.
Okay.
All right, so capital improvement requests for FY 2025. I'll just turn it to you, Gail. We don't have any real decisions to make tonight, right? It's
No,
more
you don't. This is
consideration.
just starting the discussion.
Okay.
So a couple other, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping first. I know that this
Sure.
process is a little bit different than what we've done before. Hopeful that it's simplified enough. We're going to be only looking at new projects that we have, or if there is an existing project that we have that we've been funding in the past that has changed. We do have a couple of departments that will be doing that. there's been a lot of questions about Public Works not putting in any items in here. And so I just want to reassure everybody that Public Works and the town manager's office, myself, have had multiple discussions about their current project load that they have. And in good faith, making sure that they're executing some of those projects, not putting an additional tax burden on our residents, which is very important to all of us. This will give them a little bit of time this next fiscal year to execute those projects. Also, they have 2 projects that will be going into the feasibility study. So it's not as though they're not doing anything and not looking forward to the next budget year. It's just right now they're focusing on getting those projects executed. The other items that will be coming in front of you soon over the next couple of weeks will be the Buckbee Senior Center capital assessment to keep in mind as we're looking through the budget process. And then also at the next meeting, the solid waste operations capital assessment, which will also be part of the budgeting process that you'll need to keep in mind as well. Okay. So with that being said, Scott Hausler, Parks and Recreation, is up first.
Great. Good evening. Welcome, Scott.
It's always a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm going to share with you the Lyman Point Park improvement project. This does involve some existing CIP that is part of our playground improvement program. However, this is a changed project. You received in your packet information, a thorough information description about the project. Is also a little diagram that we put together in concept of what we're kind of looking at. The existing playground structure itself is past its useful life as a playground. It's been identified to be have areas that are out of compliance. It features several unserviceable components. It's a 1995 structure, so it's had a very good useful life. The entire project also talks about accessibility to the park, into the playground. There is no access points to the playground from the parking lot, from other parts of the park to the park, through the park. There's no pedestrian access from those areas. The picnic areas on both East and West Lyman have the same concern. There's some major inequity with the facility. There's no adaptive play features on the current playground. Limited.
What are adaptive play features? Sorry.
So we're talking about features that are accessible to all people.
Oh, okay.
All users.
Gotcha.
For an example, somebody that is mobility challenged, maybe in a wheelchair, utilizing features on a playground.
Gotcha.
Accessible access is non-existent for that purpose, as well as throughout the park. Additionally, in the document that I presented, we talked about a little bit about the 42 unit complex across the street. Without any recreational open space at that particular area, it'll have major impacts on Lyman Park, as well as within walking distance. There will equate to about 175 units in the White River area that will have an impact on this particular park. Sykes Avenue, even though it's further away, we really don't have a central park, right? A green space for the community to gather within the center of town or White River Junction. So that's really important for us to think about creating and looking at multiple ways to utilize the space, especially at an area that is abutting the Connecticut and White River. So so the key improvements include ADA accessible play structure and some new park amenities, providing an inclusive experience for multi-generational use, such as, our youth, adults, seniors, caregivers, that sort of thing. Accessible pathway between Lyman Point East and West, enhancing access and use of the entire community space. Shared shaded picnic spaces near the play feature, as well as the point, Lyman Point. Improvements that promote community engagement amongst all our downtown population. And again, identifying that there's really no center green space, and we utilize this park as that purpose. The document shows and showcases and shares certainly a lot more detail of what our plan is, and here to answer any particular questions. Phase 1 is doing some preliminary conceptual design work, as well as addressing a phase of the playground feature, and identified in there how we planned on identifying the expense or utilizing funds to get phase 1 started and worked on. And phase 2 obviously is all the additional information that we have put in there as a concept for Lyman Park. So here to answer any potential questions that you have.
Scott, you talked to us that, since I'm the liaison, you talked to us also about the base for the playground.
Yep.
And could you explain to the rest of the select board?
Sure. So the residual surfacing is a wood chip residual surfacing, and New Hampshire recently passed some legislation related to playground surfacing requiring a rubberized type of surface. We'd be looking, and it creates that surface that becomes very accessible to pretty much anyone, in a wheelchair, somebody who has trouble walking, and providing safe access for that, as well as any kind of fall zone that is required, around play features. A lot of this is out here. What you see is a small unit, right? But it's got deck type of features and swings. A lot of more accessible playground structures today are more individualized and spaced out separately versus a lot of deck features. So fall zones aren't necessarily as large as you would if you had a large deck feature with a bunch of slides and that type of thing. So we're trying to make it a very inclusive playground space that multiple generations, as well as folks in the community that live here, can utilize. So.
Thank you.
Questions, Lanny?
Yeah, so I understand your thought process of expanding it for the playground in terms of the folks out on Prospect Street. The town's got a really small, less than a quarter of an acre out there on the end of Prospect Street, and then it's DEW property. At some point in time, it's going to be hazardous to cross that road. And I'm just not sure if it can be, if any property out there could be put into a playground for those kids, as opposed to having to cross the main street to come over to Lyman Point Park. I'm not saying that we can't improve Lyman Point Park, but we got a big chunk of riverfront right there. That would be a great way to utilize that riverfront property if we could get with DEW and turn that into some sort of a green space and playground space. I don't know if that's been considered or not.
It hasn't necessarily been considered as far as our department goes. One of the key visions of our department, and one of our a lot of our objectives here are to enhance and improve existing spaces that we have before building new, as part of our vision. And that's important to be able to continue to maintain and improve what we own currently and what we have versus trying to build something new at another site. But
I understand, but as we scale out for housing complexes in the town of Hartford, we're also going to have to scale out for recreational abilities in the town of Hartford. So
right.
there's got to be a match there between growth of residential complexes and parks available. So we're gonna have to grow parks at some point.
Many affordable housing developers are required to provide a certain amount of green space, and it's their responsibility to do so.
Well, has DEW made that available within this complex on Prospect Street?
I think, I mean, how do I do this politically correct? I think the green spaces in some developments utilize space that is green, but may not be specifically utilized for a recreational purpose. So I do know the pre-planning or some of the conceptual stuff out on Sykes Avenue does include some open space, you know, playground space, that sort of thing.
And not too long ago, before Prospect Street was rebuilt, there used to be houses on either side there. So I know that there's plenty of space out there available.
Yeah, it really depends on their funding sources, depending on if they have USDA, they have HUD, a lot of those different programs. They do require real green space that is actually usable. So I'm not up to date on what they're using
I
for
just didn't
their
know if in the
funding.
future we were looking at, you know, they're expanding upon property that was available to turn into parks for expanding housing complexes in the town. And it's something we're gonna have to look at because town of Hartford's growing continually.
Okay, we have a hand up.
Okay, Marie, you could go ahead.
Thank you, Marie Alvin, White River. I just wanted to point out that the zoning department does not value green space in this town. I mean, the Haven up here, they should have had, they're counting a bank as green space. And they let that stuff go. And that is where they should have a place for people and kids to hang out instead of ignoring what the criteria is within the town. It's very frustrating to see that happen, that they count a bank as usable green space. It's a big, and that is something zoning has done, just like with the parking. You know, they allow buildings to go up without enough parking. Anyway, that's all I'm gonna say. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Marie. So we've got, for this park particularly, which we're discussing right now, we have a playground that's basically out of date, it sounds like, right? And so one of the proposals to fix that up. We also have an expected increase in park use, perhaps because of Prospect Street, right? So that's sort of the idea. So anything else we should know as we consider this?
No, I think just the overall value of the park type of use and what we're looking at was some, you know, pathways to connect, you know, the east and the west section together.
Okay.
You know, there will be some, I don't know if you've been behind the bandstand recently, the tree board did a fantastic job addressing a lot of the invasive species back there, which, and raising the tree canopy a little bit. Which provided a really nice visual and view and opened up the park as well as the view of the river. So, you know, things like beautification components to this is a key to how we want to provide its accessibility, but then also provide a well-used park for the whole community to enjoy.
Is the playground currently like safe?
Yeah, it's a safe playground. It's just you know, the play value that is in its consistent design is much different. You know, things change over time, like you know, vehicles change and how they're used and driven, and same with playgrounds. So it's time for us to our plan in our reserve fund, you know, for playgrounds is to start addressing those on a regular basis, and that's why it was set up. So this gives us an opportunity to do a huge bang and a great you know, project to show how we can you know, maintain what we have and keep it valuable and increase the quality of life in the community. So
I remember whenever I go back to like my old elementary school, it's like, no, you can't go in that play space anymore. Like that's a dead trap, you know. So I'm glad to know that it's currently safe.
So within Parks and Rec, then this is your CIP proposal. There's no equipment purchases you're looking for anything. This is just one item under CIP.
Correct. But there, you have other CIP items, that are part of the parks and rec as far as and they're prioritized, differently. We look at this one as a number one priority, and it had a change. So that's why we're here tonight.
Well, that brings up the question of what else is on the CIP for Parks and Rec. I mean, I thought that's what
we have
we're
budget
discussing.
So as I stated at the beginning of this, this is only for either new projects or projects that have changed. If the board has already approved projects last year or the prior year or 5 years ago, those projects are still in motion. So they're not being brought forward because they're not negotiable. You can't just stop the projects. So what will happen when each one of these departments come forward to present their budgets, they will give you an update on each one of those projects.
I understand that, but there are projects that were on the CIP in the past that never got approved by the board.
What Scott and other department heads are bringing forward to you are the ones that they're requesting to start getting funded in the FY25 budget.
So regardless of what was on in the past, it never got approved.
If there are other projects that Scott had or other departments had, he would have brought them forward. This is a priority for his department.
Good. Okay, thank you very much, Scott.
So I just wanted to comment that, I have always thought that, there's so many New England towns that are centered around a green, like a village green. And I mean, in the village of Queechee, it's kind of like that a bit, but even still, I feel like this is a bit of our town green village center, the Central Park kind of area. And I think it will be amazing. We're so proud of this building, municipal building, that if we can bring the park up to current standards, it would really be something to be very proud of.
So I just have to add one more thing. Scott, timeline wise, phase 2 of the project is $225,000. Are you looking to have that all funded in 2025? Or are you looking to spread that over a couple of years?
If we had it funded all in 2025, then we know that we've got the project that we can pursue, right? Okay. We can complete. Yep.
So that
like that, yeah.
So the change to this current project is that it's currently being funded $25,000 a year. So just to keep that in mind, timeline wise, what we're funding now and what he's looking for this project.
So the $100,000 that have been funded is from the last 4 years.
Correct. That will cover phase 1.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott.
I think we have some more to hear.
We do. Next is the police department. And I apologize, there was a little bit of transition. I was out for a couple days, and so we did double check with VLCT to make sure that we can discuss this, and because it is simply a discussion point and no decisions are being made, then we can discuss it. So with that being said, Chief Sheldon is here. He does have, this is one of his projects he does have is an existing funding for his communications department, and he'll be asking for a change in that. The rest of them are new projects or a project that was declined in the past. So with that being said, Chief Sheldon.
Okay, well, the first one, as Gail mentioned, was the expansion of our communication center. Currently, we put 20,000 a year into that. We would like to up that to 50 to add a 4th terminal and all the computer components and monitors and programming within a whole new workstation within that 3-year period to help. First, for redundancy, if something happens to one of our other terminals, we have 3 remaining, and to keep up with the continuing growth of our dispatch center and the services we provide for other agencies.
Okay.
There was a grant that we were awarded once before from the state. That was pulled back by the state. They pulled everybody's grant back. So nobody has those grants yet, and the state does not know what they're going to do with it. They formed a task force, which I believe Chief Cooney asked to be on and didn't make the cut, but we don't have that money now. That was $450,000. So that was pulled back and off limits at this point. So we're asking for an increase from 20 to 50, so an additional 30,000 a year. And then in 3 years, we can install a 4th whole new dispatch center or station, excuse me. The other one is the other easy one for tonight is the incident response trailer. This would be $20,000 a year into a reserve fund for 5 years. So we have a mobile trailer that we can pull behind one of our vehicles to use or utilize during major incidents, like incidents at the gorge, weather events like we just had, and various other major events like active shooter, major unrest within the community. Currently, we don't have anything that we can use for that matter, and we really just run it out of our vehicles. This would provide us with something we could work out of.
Gotcha, okay.
And that was the one that was on the list before and denied.
Oh, right, yep.
And the last one is a new police station. Without going into all the details of why, there's a lot of maintenance issues, obviously, and upkeep that are starting to fail. It's I think it was 1987, it was put together, the police station, is that correct? 89, the police station was added on. It's showing its age. However, above and beyond that, because we could always seek a renovation request, we've outgrown it. We are currently shuffling people around again, making some moves to make it work for us with our social workers that we're working on a overdose response individual from one of our partners who's going to embed someone at our station, Clara Martin. We don't have a lot of space for them, so we have to kind of modify what we have to make that work. We've hired a records clerk. We have that position or that desk area located for them. So that's one thing we can cover, but we're running out of space. It just doesn't work well for us anymore. Moving forward in the future, when I ask for, and hopefully I get some community response officers, some civilian employees to go out and handle some of these calls, like a lot of communities are starting to do, I don't have any room for them. And I'd also like to make it more of a community center / police station, not just a police station. I think it's good that police are part of the community and community is part of police. That's Robert Peel's statement from years ago, obviously, but I think it's an important aspect that we bring community to the police department and police department to the community. So I want to see a community center part of this, not a big building, but a community room. And I want to see a police station that we can grow into later down the road. Right now, we can't grow. We're out of space.
So this would be something, so you mentioned like bonding for this, right? But there's also like, there's stages, right? From the start to ultimate occupancy could be like 3 or 4 years, right? So,
we're thinking 4 to 5, depending on construction times.
Okay.
My first ask would be, when I reach out to Breadloaf for some advice, they said about 60,000 for a consulting company to come in and help us decide where to put it, what design to have, and what the construction costs would be. Square footage.
So ideas about like location and what would happen to the existing building with
Correct.
fire there, stuff. Those are all, this is a process that would go over a number of years. Okay.
Yeah, the current thought process is, talking over with Chief Cooney and my own command staff, is, do we take communications with us? Do we leave it there? That is a huge expense to transfer.
Okay.
That could be a cost saving measure, but we don't know where that's going to land yet. Chief Cooney and I have had conversations about that. Again, a lot of fiber optic cable, a lot of technology is in that one section of our station.
Yeah.
We don't know how much that will cost to move. So that's something we'll have to consider with the consulting company, architectural firm.
Okay.
Is there consideration to just expand at the current location? I mean,
That was thought about, just it's not a lot of room left without going up, and there's still a parking problem. There's not a lot of parking spaces right now. My understanding is part of the station is not designed to hold a second floor. Currently, so it'd have to be completely gutted and reinforced before we can even go up to make it big enough for us.
So understand with the fire department, you want, or an ambulance, you want to have someplace central to the community. But with the police station, it's not as important because they're on patrol. But is there still things that guide location of a PD within a town as far as the location of the facility?
Ask me Friday. I'm going to a class tomorrow and Thursday with Deputy Chief Connie Kelly to discuss those things and learn about what that looks like now. What's the best practice for police stations and buildings? So ask me Friday again, I probably give you a better answer.
I'm just trying to think of parcels of land that are available that the town owns within the town of Hartford, and they're few and far between. So you know, it means shuffling around. I mean, we talked about, you know, the landfill facility. Okay, but we gotta close that down first if we're gonna put a building down there. So the biggest thing we have to worry about is location. And whether it's a location that is feasible to the establishment of a police department is the other question. So, yeah, there's a lot to ask. I mean, $6 million is something we could never fund through taxes.
Right.
We'd have to bond this no matter what we did. It don't care how many years we're looking at this project being. It's a bond. So, yeah, I mean, this to me is really early in the process because we don't even know, you know, where it can be.
Right. And but talking with the construction firms, Red Loaf, Wilmington, town of Wilmington built their police and fire station for about $285 a square foot. The current price, and that was only in 2021. The current price is $565 or $585. It's almost doubled. The individual I spoke to at Red Loaf said a good rough estimate would be $500 a square foot. And they're estimating about 12,000 to 15,000 square foot facility for the size of the department we have.
Now, is that brick and mortar? Is that stick built or is that?
Yes. I don't know the answer to that without the consulting company or architectural firm, you know, confirming it. I think it should be obviously aesthetically pleasing to the area it's in. It shouldn't be an eyesore. But it is, I guess my point is the prices have gone up and up and up. So starting the process now, I'm not sure where it's going to be when we get to the actual the quote in the bond vote.
Did you know, can you identify any particular areas you would like to see it right now?
I like Central, just for response. This area is a large coverage area, 47 square miles. It takes a long time to get to Queechee sometimes, you know. It's a good 15-minute ride unless you're going lights and sirens. So I would like to be centrally located if possible, just for the response time to you know, major calls.
Okay.
So it looks like going from 20 to 50 reserves for police communication, 20,000 going into reserves for incident response trailer. With the possible new police station, it looks like there's some stuff we could sort of do piecemeal. Like we could set aside money for like an initial survey and stuff like that. You know, regardless of when we ever get to the bond. Okay.
Do you have, like, so what would be your ideal, what year would the voters vote on this bond?
It really comes down to the timeline of putting it all together. I think when we talked about it, Gail and I, it was 2026 March. It's going to depend on the consulting firm, our architectural firm, and what their workload looks like and how soon they can get us the information we need.
Gail, as a finance administrator, can you tell us if we have any bonds dropping off in the next couple of years?
We actually do. We do have some that are going to be dropping off more on the enterprise side, but we do have some on the general fund side. And when Vermont Bond Bank came last year at this time, or maybe in the springtime, I can't remember, when they did the benchmark presentation for our fiscal year 2022, they indicated as well that we have some dropping off and the ceiling is a little bit higher for us, meaning that we have some opportunity to acquire some
Yeah,
more
we're well
debt.
within our debt threshold. I remember them saying, so we're well within the threshold of money that we could buy.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying, the debt ceiling part of it.
Right.
It's much higher than where we're at.
And especially if we have projects dropping off the bond bank. So we're always going to be bonding it. It's reality.
Absolutely. And I think, not to interrupt you, but I think for this particular, for public safety in general, whether it's the police department or the fire department, as they're looking to make these changes and expansions, by giving them the opportunity to move forward with the feasibility studies, also gives them the opportunity to explore the different funding resources that are available to help reduce the tax burden. And I say that because USDA is a great resource for public safety buildings, community safety buildings. So just take that into consideration as you're looking at this, and as well as when Chief Cooney comes up and gives a presentation on some of the needs that he has as well.
I hate to bring this up, but I'm going to ask the question: does the Jack Byrne grant do anything as far as to help out for that we can't get as far as to help out for,
The federal grant?
yeah, federal grant? for
I don't
buildings?
believe so.
Okay.
I've looked at the USDA loans at the, suggestion of Gail, and I don't know if we qualify or not, but certainly there are loans out there for these situations. So I would
Okay.
look into those when the time's right.
Yeah, there's also some CLG loans through VCDP and other local governments that would be available that the town has taken advantage of to actually help other developers within town with some of their projects. So I think that it would be a good fit.
Good, thank you.
Great. Okay, I don't think Lori's here tonight. Right?
Lori is not here. Thank you, Greg.
So we'll
Thank
hear
you.
from her next meeting. So I think we'll go to Chief Cooney.
Yeah, so I
Thanks,
just
Chief
wanted to
Sheldon.
chat a little bit about Lori. So Lori did provide a presentation. She actually had a scheduling conflict, but I did encourage her to put something in here so it at least can be on topic for discussion. She will be at the next board meeting on October 3rd prior to you making a decision. This was a follow-up. This was a request that she originally had made back in January of this year. And we tabled it at that point. And so I believe that she had some more thoughts and sensitive items that maybe will help you make a decision on whether or not you want to pursue that. And if you don't, then that frees up another 150,000 that's in your ARPA funding. Chief Cooney's here. He's got a couple different things. So he's got a CIP, and then we're going to talk about an awarding a contract, hopefully.
Yep.
So with that being said, Chief Cooney.
Thank you, Gail. Yeah, so a lot of these you might have seen before. They've been in the capital improvement plan for the fire department for a while. And some of these items, I worked in conjunction with Chief Gaston at the time to try to reimagine and do some work at the public safety facility. Fire station was originally built in '73, and then the PD was added back in, like the chief said, in '89. So we're looking, it's older, and we're looking for some improvements. So some of this is related to that site. The first thing we talked about is the storage equipment and building storage area for police and fire equipment. And that is, we're going to discuss that right after this presentation, and an RFP proposal that we've been working on, both for the fire station renovation and for storage concerns there. The second was a secure vehicle and large evidence storage area on the property, and also to provide additional parking at the public safety building for $450,000. And this is envisioned on the police side of the building. We own a considerable amount of land between us and the VA entrance on the VA cutoff road that kind of sits in the shadow of the municipal water tank cistern that sits on the hill that feeds the town water system, and terracing that property, that section of property, to put more employee parking and additional secure storage area in that area. And also discussed a training building for both fire and police. The fire trucks and the tools on those trucks aren't the most important tool in the building. It is the people that do the work. And it's important to exercise them and train them so they're proficient in their skills. And right now we have to send them to training sites. So at the State Fire Academy, which is in Pittsford, and that's where the police training facility is as well. A site would give us an opportunity to practice those, high risk, low frequency skills more often to prepare our responders to handle those kinds of emergencies. Now, I know as we've been talking about different locations for these things as of late, we've talked about redeveloping the transfer facility to house some of these things. So whether these were presented at the public safety site or elsewhere within the community, I think they're important to consider funding in the future. And then finally, the upgrade of Station 2, the fire station out in Queechee. Right now, we've been doing this for, was it 2021? We acquired the trailer up there. I think it was 2021. We signed a contract to host that trailer. So we've got 2 employees out in a trailer 24 hours a day adjacent to the Queechee Fire Station that are staffing it with an engine and an ambulance. So we've been working through the process for quite a while now to determine how to proceed and at what fashion to get a contractor to start the pricing process so we can come back to you with a bond or bond recommendation or other municipal financing options to do some more permanent changes to that site. And happy to answer questions.
Questions for Scott? Kim?
And I'm not sure if this, I guess it relates to both this phase 3. The question I emailed about the timeline. So if this is, let me see if I can, let me just read my question originally. The RFP describes a schedule that begins work in January 2024 for phase 3. If this project is to go in part or in full to bond, would the voters need to approve that in March 2024?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that when Estes and Gallup, and you're talking about the RFP. Yeah, when Estes and Gallup presented it, it was an illustrative of timeline.
Okay.
Yeah,
so-
they're well aware that we can't proceed until funding is approved.
Okay, great. And then I Lady touched on this earlier, but I think I've always kind of wondered in how public safety departments feel about the transfer station location for a training facility. I mean, I'm still kind of getting my head around what is like if now, which just hearing about a new police station, I feel like tonight's the first night I kind of really gotten that. I mean, from when we got the email today. So that's like a whole brand new concept. So just trying to envision, I guess I would like to get a sense of what you see the public safety department looking like in 5 to 10 years from now. Like what's the whole big picture like in terms of facilities compared to what it is now?
Get my crystal ball out. And
I mean, like
do that.
if you were
But,
to,
sure,
you know,
I'm happy to
the
kind of
funding
just.
were there.
If all my funding was available, sure. I think the transfer site is, for space wise, is a great opportunity to use to create some of these structures. I think they talked to the police have to set up a target range when they're doing their qualifying all the time. That requires a lot of logistics and a trailer and moving it to a site, setting things up and making sure they've got all the people notified of using somebody else's property to do all these kind of things. So having an established range where people can go and just do these things already established makes a lot of sense to me. A structure to do training in. And if you're familiar with, Lanny probably is because he's been to the academies and stuff before, but these training buildings are, Connex boxes for the most part. These are big steel shipping containers that are stacked in some sort of arrangement that allows us to do forcible entry on doors and create fires in structures that we control and actually practice doing fire extinguishment and things like that. It's the law enforcement doing, searches and seizures and those kind of practice of training tactics and things like that in that kind of environment that you can damage and you can do those kind of things in. So I envision a training ground for our people.
At the same look at transfer station
Yeah,
location?
I think
Okay,
that
great,
would be,
yeah,
I think that's a great opportunity there to look at.
Yeah.
If the site allows that kind of development, I think that would be a good use of that space, for sure. As far as the main fire station, I mean, some of these discussions about where PD should be have been around for a while. I don't think anybody's run with it yet. So I think they are out of space. What to do with the rest of the building if they vacated? It could be an expansion of, I'm out of space too. I've got people packed pretty tight in there. The fire marshals are all stuffed in random locations and things like that. So maybe building inspection and planning and plans review and those kind of things happen up there because those departments are intertwined. Maybe the communications center is pretty tight. Expansion of the communications center and to fill what used to be occupied by police now would be expansion of the communications center. Really formalizing our town's emergency operations center kind of makes sense too. Rather than setting up tables and chairs and trying to run this place in a natural disaster or any other kind of emergency, have a place that's already set up and established that, elected representatives, leadership, department heads can be at and function as a command and control area for those kind of emergencies. That would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I had, when I heard it tonight about the prospect of building a new PD, I thought to myself, it's an excellent opportunity for the fire department to grow out some up there. I'd also thought that, we could possibly put that structure for storage there where the parking is for the PD, but you're saying there's land available up on the hill to do that. So that's still utilizing plenty of parking and having the expansion. So the long and the short of it here is that if any department's going to move, it's going to be the PD. Make much more sense for the PD to relocate than the fire department. It's much more cost effective for the town to have that happen.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people don't realize the insurance impact on moving a fire station too.
Well, that's like I
Because
said.
your homeowner's insurance is based on your insurance score, and that's your relationship and distance to a fire station.
Yeah, that's why I made the statement of the placement of fire station is much more important than the placement of police station. So
so if you pluck me up and move me over, then somebody on the tail end of it might get an effect in their insurance rate.
In terms of Kim's question, I'm going to piggyback on that a little bit. Where do you see, or what do you see for additional apparatus and apparatus bays that would be needed? And where would those go if we were to move the fire department? Could we put additional bays in that building somewhere while still having offices for fire marshals or planning department if we were to move that up there?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure I'd expand there, to tell you the truth, because I think it's more effective to residents to actually spread me out than to
So we're talking about a Station 3 in Wilder, maybe.
Pack me out of tight, exactly.
Yeah, Station 3 in
Yeah,
Wilder.
so, my selfish reasons of my own, if you're gonna build a police station, then build it in Wilder, tack on a couple bays to it, 2 bays like we're doing in Queechee to put a fire engine and an ambulance in Wilder. And we've got, we're affecting the village of Wilder with more EMS responders and firefighters too. So, I mean, that's, Wilder makes sense to me there for that reason, because we don't have a presence there.
Yeah, well, there's talk of a location that would be, without going into too much detail, there's talk of a location that would be a location for a Station 3 there.
Yeah.
So, okay, so yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that this is the best route to head for. With that said, you're not looking for monies for expanding anywhere within Station 1. Other than communications, you're looking at money for that. But you've done all the construction on Station 1 for all the troops, right?
Yeah, the pre-plan for the construction that would happen to Station 1 is purely, and you're gonna see that when we talk about the RFP next, is this storage for the trailers and the
Right,
emergency
that's
response
it
equipment
there. But as far
and
as the
stuff
actual
like that.
structural building that's on site,
No, at this time, I think I've developed as much as I can within the 4 walls of the fire station to fit my people.
So
It's
when we
not,
look at-
it's not effective, but it's done.
so when we look at moving the PD, then we'll come back to look at advancing the fire
Oh,
department over that area.
For sure. I think if there is a desire in the future to bond a new police facility, then I would hope that we include funds to do a renovation at the VA
Right.
cutoff code as
Yeah,
well.
that makes
To meet the
complete-
needs of whatever that is going to become in this.
It makes a lot more financial sense to do that, so.
Yeah.
Scott, anything else on the CIP stuff before? we go
No,
to
that's
RFP?
it. And
Okay.
the rest of it is addressed in the RFP.
Yeah, if you'd like to do it.
Okay. I move the select board authorize the acting town manager to award the construction management RFP for Station 2 renovations and a public safety storage building to Estes and Gallup LLC.
I'll second.
A second from Ally, any discussion?
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking you would hear a little more.
No, you can. I'm happy to.
I mean, let's just get a quick, yeah, I guess I wasn't sure that everyone was on board with this, but if we are, then great.
Well, there's a lot more to it, but we're talking only a small segment of what the future is for the
But
fire
what the
department.
Station 2 bill and the.
Scott, you want to just walk us through this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wait a minute, wait a minute though. As
No,
far-
we're up on the
no.
RFP. We need to hear some background.
In
on
terms of
this, right?
procedure though, we have a motion on the floor.
Okay.
We can have discussion.
Right,
We're
but
having
the discussion is amongst us, it doesn't mean the public, so.
Why?
Or because that's Robert's rules of
I'm
order.
pretty sure
We have
we
a discussion.
if that's actually a rule, I don't remember that ever being.
We can
Okay.
table it.
We can have discussion from Scott, I think.
Just table it.
Scott?
Sure. So we put out the RFP shortly thereafter. We worked with Studio Nexus as an architect local to town after we got the authorization from you. Put it out the first time for a design build contract and got absolutely no, it was crickets. We didn't hear a thing. And then talked to Studio Nexus again after that experience. And they said, well, construction management RFPs are typically what the community responds to. It gives them more flexibility and ability to do these kind of studies. So the proposal you have is from Estes and Gallup. They were our only ones. They're local to Lyme. They've done a lot of business in the community. I met with Tim Estes. He visited the sites. He's pretty much said, I believe in what you folks are doing. We're going to do all the pre-construction stuff pro bono for you in order to get you some numbers so you can go back to the select board with some good cost numbers so we can talk, so you can have that discussion about a bond with them in the future. So that's where we are. There's really only conceptual drawings done to date. It envisions a renovation, not a new build, for example. I mean, new building on the sides of it, but not a tear down and reconstruction. It's using old equipment and some new builds, but that's where we are. What I'm asking for tonight is your authorization to say that Estes and Gallup is going to be the contractor for this, for construction management, and then we'll move through the pre-construction phase, allow them to go out to vendors and their subcontractors and get some pricing for us. So I come back to you, hopefully, my plan, the timeline I gave him is so that I can give you a number that you can consider for bond this fiscal year.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So a motion from Mary, a second from Ally. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. And Dan? He's got a thumbs up. Okay.
All right, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Budget guidance. So Gail, I think is gonna just review with us what our budget guidance was last cycle, right? Just something for us to think about.
Yeah, so I attached the budget guidance from last year for 2024 and things, to take into consideration, because at the next meeting on October 3rd, you need to provide the budget guidance for 2025, as well as your CIP projects that we need to finalize.
Okay.
I also included, actually, I'm not sure if the budget calendar was in there or not, but take a look at this. This is your opportunity to, take 5 or 10 minutes to talk about it now amongst yourselves, and then maybe come, unless you have things that you want to talk about, and just in preparation of the meeting on the 3rd. And, keeping in mind, again, CIP, we already have some projects that are being funded. And when I say that, we have multiple departments that have equipment reserves that the board either last year or previously had committed we're going to continue to fund at, $50,000 a year. So those are items that to take into consideration as you're moving forward. And then never forget the difference between operations, our daily, day-to-day operations, and then your long-term goals that you have. So with that being said, I'm not sure, to date, if there's a discussion that you would, amongst the board, that you would like to have to take into consideration to finalize for our next meeting.
Kim, I think.
Do you need, so I just I just have a couple of minor suggestions that I would mostly keep the same guidance, but then a couple questions that I should have asked this before, but do you know where we're at in terms of the unassigned fund balance relating to the general fund operating budget?
I do. I say that, but I did a rough estimate for it, because as you know, we're still trying to close out FY23, and then also taking into consideration encumbrances, because we have so many projects that are going. When we ended FY22, we were at 2.7 million, and as of right now, it's close to almost 5 million.
So
That includes the encumbrances, and it also includes the $1 million that we set aside for FY24.
So what's the percentage of what's?
It's about 29%.
Okay, so So anyway, we might want to revisit that if we want to maintain an unassigned fund balance of 10% of the annual general fund. And then the only other things I had was this is in logistical guidance. Consider a 5% increase to fund needs. Was that just like what we were giving for us an overall budget increase guidance? Like, I don't know what.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Anyway, that's something that I think we either need to say it more specifically or take it out or come up with a different percentage.
I think it's definitely a little bit clunky.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to limit like tax increases by a certain amount. If you could put that, yeah, this is a little.
Yeah, so that is something we could just rephrase and consider what percentage that they want to consider. And then in the detailed guidance, the third one, prioritize funding the ongoing work at the solid waste transfer facility. I mean, I'm in support of that. I also just think that's kind of a little vague.
So my recommendation at this point is that you would remove that. You did set funds aside out of the ARPA funding to do an assessment of that. Brian will be here on October 3rd to give you an update because it's really important that you have that information as you're making these decisions to go forward. So I would recommend that you probably question mark that one, and depending on where we're at with the assessment, what they have for recommendations so far.
Potentially incorporate some of that into here if we need to. And then I would just take out include funding for parking meters because we've already done that.
Well, the parking meters, it's not the full project of the, right? So I would definitely, that's another thing I certainly could ask Lori to see where she's at. I can't remember. I apologize off the top of my head. Lanny, do you remember? We just talked about this at the last meeting because you wanted an update on it, and I apologize. I forget what it was, but I know that the money that we set aside was only for this.
Like
For the equipment.
For the equipment,
yeah,
it
for
was.
purchasing. There was no installation on that funds.
Yeah, so I definitely would keep
Purchase.
that.
Okay.
And I can actually send Lori an email and ask her to provide any updates regarding that. Otherwise, I would say it's probably going to have to get pushed out to a different budget year because I don't know how you can, in good conscience, set money aside for something that.
Well, we used ARPA, I mean, we're using ARPA for the
We did,
equipment.
yep.
Okay, and so we have to do that before in 2024.
24, correct. Well, it has to be executed. You have to obligate it by 2024 and you have to execute it by 2026. So you.
Wait a minute, we're talking about not doing the parking meters this year? Is that?
I'm not talking about.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when Lori comes back and she provides an update on this, depending on where they're at in that, in the project, you may not set money aside in 2025 for it. Because how can you set money aside if you don't know how much the project is going to be? That's my only point.
So we have money allocated in 2024 to purchase the damn things, but we don't have any money to put them in the ground?
No, you don't.
Why are you smiling like a Cheshire cat?
Well, that was a decision that you made as a board to set aside the funding for the equipment.
So why can't we allocate some of the ARPA funds that we still have left to put, we're losing money by not having those in the ground. And we're killing ourselves on parking by downtown by not having them in the ground.
Okay, so Kim brought this up to have a discussion regarding it. And so we're just having a discussion. I'm not saying that there's not going to be funding available. I'm just.
Yeah, this is just the guidance, right? So we do want to probably in our guidance include the funding if
who is going
to, whatever it costs.
Are we going to contract that, or is DPW going to take that task on of installing them?
I don't know if anybody knows, except for Lori, and she'll be here next.
I just think if we have ARPA funds, we have to put them into play this year to get the parking meters installed. Because, as I said.
Well, then that's a discussion you as a board are going to have to determine what your priorities are because, obviously it's going to be probably a significant amount of money to have the system and manage it, et cetera. So this is a, you know, a great discussion point to discuss it, because it will be a sizable amount. So as you're hearing about the other items that have come before you, take this into consideration as well.
So there's been no RFP put out there for even purchase of parking meters whatsoever.
The only update that I have is what was provided a couple weeks ago, or last meeting and the meeting before, regarding the parking meters.
What? Okay, I mean, there's got to be a reason why we're so slow to act on this.
Well, I think Lori will be here to answer all of our parking related questions. Because we just don't know. So.
Correct.
Any other thoughts on the guidance? I mean, we got to finalize this next meeting. Are there any? Kim mentioned, you know, a couple things she would change or strike.
Anyone have any thoughts about? I mean, what are your thoughts about the just setting a guidance for a cap on tax rate?
Well, you blew it last year. What does it matter?
This kind of.
Are you saying I blew it?
Well, the board blew it. The board blew it. When I say
The
you,
board made
the
an
board
informed
blew it.
decision by a majority to offer the budget that was adopted by
Yeah,
the citizens of Hartford overwhelmingly at the last election.
And it blew the guidance that we wanted.
Well,
you know, so
guidance is guidance, you know.
So why didn't put anything out this year though?
Okay.
You know?
My
Yes, Ally?
suggestion would be to say, you know, we could say consider a maximum of 5% or whatever we felt would be a reasonable increase. You know, a maximum of 5% increase from, you know, the previous fiscal year to the current fiscal year or something to that effect, so that there's an intention not to cross that threshold and be mindful of the tax increase
Well,
for sure.
So we went above and beyond what the finance director, the acting town manager presented last year, presented us with a level funded budget. Okay. We funded everything that was required within the town of Hartford, but the select board decided it wasn't good enough and put in all these extra things. And I'm standing up for Gail here because she did a great job of providing us a level funded budget. But for some reason, we went beyond that. Okay. There's no reason why we can't have a level funded budget to increase of what we did this year, because we increased it tremendously this year for no reason.
Tax rate didn't go up more than 5%.
No.
No, it didn't go up more than 5%, but it went up beyond what Gail had proposed, which would have been a level funded budget.
Well, we looked at the budget and we decided, a majority of the board decided to add additional items that went above what Gail had brought to us. And we put it to the public. We had a night where we explained the increase in the amount and they approved it. I mean,
we don't have the ARPA funds. You know, we don't have the level of ARPA funds anymore.
Last year's budget. I mean.
But what I'm saying is that we should look at level funding the budget. What was our budget number last year?
Guys, this is getting a little.
No, this is a debate that we need to have. All right.
Well, and
Yeah.
so the FY22 budget was 17.6 million and the FY23 budget was 18.4 million.
What was the increase then?
I don't have the increase in front of me. I think it ended up being little over 3 cents, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, but I mean, percentage wise, we put a cap on it. We'd said we were going to cap it at a certain amount.
I don't have that. I wasn't prepared to have that discussion.
Okay, but you remember that happening because
I do. I have a meeting notes from every meeting that we had and the revisions that we made. And
right. And do you remember vaguely what it went above your level funding?
well, it's whatever it ended up at.
Did our guidance last year say provide us a level funded budget?
You have it. You have it.
So
Yeah, so
yeah, so Lanny, what I would say is, you know, I think maybe I'm making an assumption here, but I think all of us are mindful of not burdening our residents with taxes and being as reasonable as possible. And we know that we need to, if there are certain things that we want to have happen, you know, and we feel like it's worth it, we have to make those determinations. But what I'm hearing from you is that, you know, you might make a suggestion in this budget guidance memo of having level a level budget or sticking as close to that as possible from fiscal year to fiscal year. What I'm hearing from other folks, and I may feel the same, is that that might not be feasible. So instead of maybe rehashing what happened in our last budget cycle, right, we're looking to see how we can move ahead with this budget guidance. So if there is a way to, again, approach it as, you know, consider a maximum of whatever increase that we think is feasible and hopefully not overburdening our taxpayers, I would go with that. But what it sounds like, and we could potentially hash it out again in the next meeting when we finalize it, but what it sounds like is the rest of the board maybe can't agree to saying that in this budget guidance memo, we want to have a level funding. Like that might be feasible to you and something that you might individually want to add, but it might not change the outcome of maybe the group's decision.
I understand what you're saying. I believe last year, now that memory serves me correctly, I remember that we said we were not going to exceed 3%.
And it went to 3.8.
3.8, okay, 3.8, okay. And Gail presented us with that budget at 3.8, okay? And we went beyond that 3.8 to, do you remember? We went beyond that 3.8, doesn't matter. We went beyond that 3.8, okay? So I understand what you're saying. So I would be supportive of saying no more than 3%, all right? That way, if it comes back to us with something like 3.5, it's stomachable, okay? But we're talking about just a free-for-all. I mean, we went free-for-all last year when we had ARPA funds, okay? You got to cut it, you got to, you know, reel it in a little bit and realize that we cannot provide everything to everyone. And there's got to be cuts made. So I would be supportive of no more than a 3% raise in the budget. But you look at the fact of, in addition to our tax rate increase, the school was astronomical raise. And you may say, well, the school's not us, but guess what? It's still coming out of your pocketbook, the whole thing. All right. So if we can keep ours down, whatever we can, we're helping the taxpayer save money. And that's what I'm supportive of. Yep.
I think my only other recommendation is for the board to keep in mind, there are some increases that we don't have control over, the benefits for the employees. And so as you're setting the guidance on limits that you want to, for a percentage increase, is that please take that in consideration and maybe have a separate piece just for that. But are we ready to move on to the next one?
Are we going to present a not to exceed number to?
You're not making any decisions this evening. It's just a discussion on next week. Excuse me, next meeting is when you'll set the budget guidance. So this was an opportunity for all of you to have a discussion on thoughts of things that you would like to see. And then when you come back on the 3rd, you'll make that decision.
Yeah, anyone's free to make a motion or a suggestion about limiting the increase. I would just remind everyone that this is guidance.
Yeah.
Alec?
Oh, no, I mean, I was just gonna say that, you know, Lanny, I'm also supportive of putting a proposed maximum increase in that line, just so that we have something that's reasonable, and we can fine tune what that is at the next meeting, but that seems reasonable to me, so we can just have a threshold that we're aware of.
Yeah, let's face it, taxes should go up every year. Okay, they should.
Right.
I mean, that makes sense.
And, yeah.
Okay, it's inflation. Okay, but there has to be cap on it as well.
Sure.
So,
Gail, do you want to take it as the next item, the encumbrances? Well, I think we're doing that next meeting.
Oh, okay.
I already did that.
There was, as I stated at the beginning, there was a little bit of hiccups with the agenda this time frame. So Lana did send out the corrected information for it. So we did adopt the budget calendar last.
Yeah, I didn't see anything about well, maybe it's in a different store, whatever's next.
where are there encumbered? Yeah, where are the encumbrances, I guess?
They were in the board packet.
Yeah, I remember that, but I can't find them off the top of my head.
So every year we do this as a requirement. The finance director usually comes in front of you and requests approval for encumbrances. This is really just procedural. And these encumbrances cover two different things. One is it covers fiscal year 2023, which is the fiscal year that we just finished. It includes projects that are in motion that haven't been executed. Some are for external reasons why, whether they be environmental factors, it could be staffing, supply chain. We're definitely getting back on track after COVID. It's been rebirth for many vendors in trying to get back on track. So last year we came in front of you and asked for 2.6 million. This year we're here for 2.7 million. 1.2 million of that was already approved from you. You approved it last year. So we're actually only looking at 1.4 million from fiscal year 2023. And Kim had asked the question specifically, which are there any projects in there or any items that are above $100,000? And there's one is the paving. We put forth a $350,000 encumbrance for paving. The reason why that was done is to help offset the 2025 budget. Because we know that we're going to have to come forward. We already funded the 2024. We were able to do that out of reserves with no impact to the taxpayers. And as we're trying to build the reserve for paving, as we've discussed for many, many years, it's important that we have that. So that is one item that is exceptionally higher. And if it is approved, we will take that money and actually put it in the paving reserve. So it'll be there. And you'll need to take that into consideration when we're drafting the 2025 budget as well. The other items, two items that are not $100,000, but they were actually approved by the board when we were doing the FY24 budget. The $96,000 that was needed to finish the Queechee box culvert. And then also the Fairview Terrace Gate Street was $63,000. And those were noted within the budget when we were doing the budget process.
Those are the contracted services? Where were
They
those?
are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Gail, where do you, at what point will you report back to us on the encumbrances to date again? I mean, when we get closer to, say, January, will you know how much money is still out there?
I'm not sure. I look at it every month when we do the financial statements. I look at it every month, and that's also as the projects are moving through the process, through the purchasing policy. Obviously, we need to. I see them quite frequently, so I'm not sure what your question.
When this goes out to the taxpayers in the books, okay, I guess when it gets printed, this number will have a significant change.
This is
right?
not going to. It wouldn't go out in the book. There doesn't go anywhere.
Okay.
What this does is it will continue the process when you, many of them have already been completed because this is based on 630, but there is, like example paving. If you don't want to do that, then we can take it out, but the rest of them are already in motion. So
none of this won't come down now between now and.
It will as they're executed. Like if I was to run it right now, it potentially could be only 2 million, depending on how many projects have been executed since June 30th.
So based on the executable projects that we have out there, we may see 1 million.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's helpful to understand that.
Yeah. I mean, last year I came in front of you, it was 2.6 million, and now we're down to 1.2 million for the prior year.
Yep.
So that's as items are being executed. And I think a lot of that has to do with, department heads being in the right position with right leadership and right funding to be able to work with vendors to get projects executed.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Make a motion.
I have one more
Oh, sorry.
Is there the possibility that we could ever get a more detailed list of the projects that are encumbered?
I certainly could provide it. But again, at the town manager level manages the actual budget. And so in most of these items, either they've come in front of, would have come in front of you if they're big items, you would have approved them through contracts. The other part of it is you see them in the AP cycle. And then you have the actual budget that you'd be looking at them. So I think, looking at your manifest, you all have the GL codes. I went through and spent all that time putting
Yeah.
those prefixes.
I don't
in,
object
so.
to your request, Kim, but it's gonna change so much between now and
It's fine.
January.
I mean,
It
it just,
does.
like, I imagine just
You
to
know.
get, like, so the contracted services, 1.4 million, like, that's stuff to do with like the South Main Street and the parking lot and stuff like that, I presume.
It has multiple
When it comes up in
projects.
January, when we get the budget finalized, it might be worth knowing.
Yeah, I mean, I can
Yeah.
certainly let you,
Yeah, at that point in time, it would be nice to know. But I mean, between now and then, in January, because we're still in summer construction season.
Right.
So,
And you
between
also
now and
could ask
January,
for it,
I would fully support that, so.
Then you want to make a motion on this one?
Yeah. Are you all set, Kim?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so, I recommend, make a motion, the select board approve 2023 encumbrance request for items, services, projects, and products previously approved in operating budgets.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a second. Kim, any discussion on this? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah,
Okay.
thumbs up.
And our other item is Municipal line of credits.
yes. So every year we've been coming forward and looking for a line of credit. I mentioned this at a couple meetings ago in preface for this coming up. Historically, we've asked for a general fund line of credit and a TIF line of credit, and we never utilized any of them, but it was nice to have them. Currently, with the amount of projects that we have and talking with the department heads, we have gone forward and started the process with Mascoma Bank to ask for a line of credit in the amount of $3 million for a term of 12 months to cover the ongoing construction needs. I think all of you, we only receive taxes twice a year. There's also the influx of reimbursement, whether it's through bond reimbursement, grant funding, or the revolving state water revolving loan fund. So what this will help, it will bridge any gaps that we may have during those cash influxes. And they're willing to do a $3 million line of credit, tax exempt tax rate at 4.9%. It would begin on or around October 1st and go for 12 months. And the amount would be, any balance would be due in full prior to it maturing.
Yeah, maybe it's not this point for the question, but do we have any money still waiting out there from FEMA to reimburse us for?
For current projects, you mean talking about the most recent storm that we have? We actually just got assigned a FEMA specific representative, and I'm sorry, I'm probably using the wrong term. We've had a lot of contacts with FEMA, but to actually have an individual person that we can work with, we actually just found, we got notified that we have one. So all of that money would be outstanding.
So that would be like this, what this would cover until we get the funding.
That we've paid all those vendors for,
Right,
correct? This would be,
okay.
that's a great example of it, Lanny.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's why I'm trying to bring that up.
Yeah.
So, and we don't know, of course, what we're looking to get from FEMA.
No,
at
we
this point,
don't.
so-
And taking that aside, South Main parking lot, that's going to start going full swing. Queechee Box Culvert. You're going to start seeing these manifests that are going to be millions of dollars, and we need to make sure that we have funding to cover it.
All right. Any other questions? I'll make a motion.
Is the motion
Mary,
in
the
two parts
I
or
think it's
just?
the
all?
second, the second paragraph, the town of Hartford here, but Hartford hereby.
Okay, which one do you want?
Joe Major.
The bottom one, please.
So
And then there is a form that needs to be signed by those of you that are here. There, it is majority of those of you that are here support it. That Lana has and needs to be signed, which is authorizing Joe as the treasurer to execute the loan documents, and then we'll follow the same process that we had set up before, that in the event that we needed to do a draw on the line of credit. There's a form that we have, and comes from my department, requesting it, copies of the invoices, and then what the repayment source is.
I'll make this motion,
Okay.
but I'm a little hesitant to, authorize someone who's a Buffalo Bills fan. So, but nevertheless, I will do that. So I make a motion, the town of Hartford Vermont Select Board give town treasurer Joe Major authority to execute all loan documents related to obtaining a line of credit loan in the amount of $3 million for a term of 1st of October 2023 through 30th of September 2024. To that effect, on behalf of the town of Hartford, Vermont.
I'll second the
We have
motion.
a second from Mary. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And I hope I hope that Joe's watching this.
Okay, commission reports. Kim, you want to start us off tonight?
Sure. Just had one this week. The planning commission held their town plan housing chapter update meeting, and staff finalized the draft chapter and reviewed with the planning commission and town plan steering committee on September 12th. Staff started making the agreed upon changes in preparation for community meeting in October.
Okay, Dan, do you have any commission reports?
All good, thank you.
Okay, Mary?
Yep, from Hartford Parks and Rec. There are 2 vacant positions for Hartford Parks and Rec. The Hurricane Hill Trail Run occurred on August 26th with the 10K race doing 2 loops of the 5K loop due to wet conditions on the course, but this proved easier to manage. Very good turnout. WABA has begun startup procedures. The department's working with the Upper Valley Hawks Special Olympics to construct a semi-permanent bocce court in one of the parks. They haven't decided yet. Thanks to Gail for mentioning the bike track for the very young bikers at Radcliffe. A trial locked needle box drop will be placed at a park's location to be determined soon. All needles, diabetic or otherwise, that find their way to the park will be monitored by the health officer. This was a recommendation of the Parks and Recreation Department in concert with the health officer. There was some confusion among people about how the state gets involved with all of this. And Brett informed us that the state commissions the health officer and the town employs them.
Thanks, Mary. Glad to hear about the bocce court. I love bocce. Ally?
None for me.
Rocket's on here. Lanny, you got anything?
Nothing.
I don't have anything either, so let's do the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I move that the select board approve payrolls ending September 2nd, 2023 and September 16th, 2023, as well as meeting minutes of September 5th, 2023, and AP manifests of September 7th, September 15th, and September 2nd, 2023.
I'll second.
We have a second from Ally. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Then we've got an executive session. I imagine it'll be pretty swift, but we have to do 2 motions to get
just call
into executive session. So we make the first motion, we vote on it, then we make the second motion and go into executive session.
and I'll call you for executive session on the phone.
Ally, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I move to find that premature general public knowledge of pending civil litigation to which the public body as a party will clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage by disclosing its communications.
Have a second.
I'll second the motion.
Second for Mary. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then the other motion? Mary, you want to make this one?
Sure. I move that we enter executive session to discuss pending civil litigation under the provisions of 1 VSA 313A1E and to discuss the employment of public officers pursuant to 1 VSA 313A3.
Oh, second.
We have a second from Ally. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we're going into executive session.
Wait.
Oh, we have to sign.
What's that? Oh, yeah. Let's
I got
sign that.
tons.
Don't go anywhere till we sign
Yes.
stuff.
Okay.
everyone's ready, I will take a motion to come out of executive session.
Mr. Chair, I move that we come out of executive session.
1 second.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mary. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're out of executive session.
A second by Mary.
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Kim?
I move that the select board adopt the service out of grade proposal from Gail Ostrov and Paula Melty and that we authorize the chair to sign the document.
I'll second the motion.
Just question, do we need to state the time period in the motion or no?
The proposal.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's probably fine.
Okay.
So,
Second by Mary.
Yes.
okay, any discussion? Lanny?
Yeah, my understanding of the charter is that the select board has one employee, that being the town manager, and I don't believe that this is in standing with the charter, and I'm not in agreement with this, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lanny. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So 1 no, 5 ayes, and 1 absent. I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I will second.
Yeah, Ally seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.